Chapter 1369. 100 miles away. Qin Yuandai stared at Lu Ye's figure and transmitted her voice to Zhao Tianmu. How strong is he? Comparable to the later stage of constellation. Can you kill him? Zhao Tianmu was submissive. I'm afraid it'll be difficult. He had fought with Lu Yi before and naturally knew some details about him. He's injured. Qin Yuandai said slowly. Zhao Tianmu was stunned and immediately said, Then maybe we can try. No matter what method you use, kill him for me. I'll let bygones be bygones. Qin Yuandai's voice sounded. Zhao Tianmu quickly accepted the order. Listen to my orders. Qin Yuandai ordered again. Originally, she felt that Tang Yifeng's suggestion was not bad. Who didn't have a few enemies in the starry sky? If she could turn her enemies into friends, it would be a good story. Sunning was already dead. Although she valued this descendant, she was not foolish enough to provoke a dispute between the two worlds over the death of a descendant, especially when the strength of the opposite world was not weak. If they really fought, more people would die. Moreover, she did not know who killed Sunning before, so it was hard to say who killed him. But now, the murderer jumped out himself and was arrogant and deliberately provoked her. How could she tolerate this? If she tolerated this, it would definitely affect her dignity. In the future, the cultivators of the Wuxia continent would ride on the heads of the people of the Qingli Taoist world. A thought flashed through her mind, and she already had a plan. She looked at Tang Yifeng and slowly said, I'm very interested in fellow Taoist's proposal. There will always be casualties when cultivators fight for supremacy. Repaying grievances with grievances is indeed not the style of a great family. It's also not the style of our cultivators. Tang Yifeng laughed heartily. It's rare for you to be so open-minded. It's really a blessing for the two worlds. However, Qin Yuandai changed the topic. However, fellow Taoist, let's not talk about the true lake and immortal ocean cultivators who died in your world. It is a fact that my Qingli Dao world lost 3 constellations, especially one of them who was related to me by blood. I thought highly of her. When her soul lamp was extinguished, I felt as if a knife was being twisted in my heart, and I was heartbroken. Tang Yifeng lowered his eyes and consoled. Fellow Taoist, please restrain your grief. In life, there are always such accidents. Yeah. Qin Yuandai nodded in agreement. Accidents always happen when you least expect them to. I am very happy that you are willing to represent your world and bury the hatchet with the Qingli Dao world. However, your disciple seems to have a deep grudge against you? Tang Yifeng said. The child has been spoiled. Fellow Taoist, there's no need to pay attention to him. He spoke incoherently, so I have already punished him. Qin Yuandai shook her head and said, It's not just your disciple. I also have some problems here. Tang Yifeng was surprised. Oh, if fellow Taoist Qin has any problems, why don't you tell us? If there's a problem, we can solve it. Qin Yuandai turned to look at Zhao Tianmu and sighed. My disciple has been blaming himself ever since he returned. He blamed himself for not taking good care of his junior brothers and sisters. He kept saying that he wanted to avenge his junior brothers and sisters. I'm already old and I don't want to travel far. But he dragged me along. Tang Yifeng chuckled. It seems that we both have a troublesome disciple. Qin Yuandai said, Yes, the disciple is not sensible. It's us the elders, who did not discipline him strictly. This rebellious disciple just told me that if we just let it go and make peace, I'm afraid he will feel uneasy for the rest of his life. I don't have many direct disciples, so it's really difficult. I don't know what to do at this time. Tang Yifeng showed a look of understanding. Fellow Taoist, it's normal for this disciple to want to avenge his junior brothers and sisters. However, it's not good to be too obstructive. Since they are so troublesome, why don't we let them have a fight? As the saying goes, no discord, no concord. After this fight, no matter what the process is, we won't interfere. No matter what the result is, we won't affect the friendship between our two worlds. How about it? Qin Yuandai's withered face showed a smile. Fellow Taoist, this suggestion is good. However, my disciple has the strength of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. Your disciple, Lu Yi, who had just rushed back to their camp from 5 kilometers away, jumped out with a whoosh. He killed a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. He wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth while he was at it. Zhao Tianmu also flashed and landed in front of Qin Yuandai, giving tit for tat. Then we'll have to see if you have the ability. A prodigal dog dares to bark? Lu Yi didn't even look him in the eye. Zhao Tianmu was so angry that his nose was almost crooked, but he couldn't refute anything. He could only sulk. Tang Yifeng chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist Qin, the two little fellows are having a lively conversation. Then let's do as we said before?" "Very good." Qin Yuandai nodded slightly. Using Zhao Tianmu's figure as cover, she secretly transmitted her voice. "Kill him." At the same time, Tang Yifeng also warned Lu Yi, "You must be careful. If you don't have full confidence, don't take the risk." Lu Yi didn't say anything. Before the results were out, how could he have full confidence? However, the current situation was going according to plan, and it could be considered the best situation. The other party had Yu Yao, and she was at the middle stage at that. On their side, they only had 4 fake goods. If they really fought, they definitely wouldn't have an easy time. The only thing he could rely on was the 2 red jade talismans that Su Yuqing had bestowed upon him back then. During these few months of waiting for the enemy's arrival, besides cultivating, he had also been studying the power of these 2 red jade talismans. However, jade talismans were things that couldn't be seen from their surface. They had to be activated to know their specific effects. Thus, it was impossible for Tang Yifeng to tell him not to take the risk if he didn't have full confidence. Ever since he decided to meet the enemy in the air near the Wushuang continent and placed his hopes on the red talismans, it was already his biggest risk. With his cultivation at the early stage of the constellation realm, activating a red talisman wasn't a simple matter. It required a certain amount of time to accumulate power, because he had to pour enough spiritual power into the red talisman. This wasn't something that could be done in 1 or 2 breaths. Lu Yi had estimated that the fastest time he could activate the red talisman was 10 breaths. This way, he wouldn't be able to directly activate the red talisman on Yu Yao. She wasn't dead, so she wouldn't just stand there and wait for him to use his techniques. The moment she sensed that something was wrong, she would definitely interfere. Thus, he needed some concealment. Provoking the other party's anger and facilitating this kind of battle was part of his plan. This was why he had so many wild and unruly performances. The path had already been paved. Whether or not he could proceed smoothly according to his original plan would depend on Lu Ye's ability to adapt. Kill Yu Yao. Just thinking about it was such an exciting thing. With a burst of spiritual power, he charged forward. At the same time that his figure swayed, Zhao Tianmu also made his move. Right now they were 50 kilometers apart. Although his late-stage constellation realm techniques could barely reach 50 kilometers away, that was only in theory. In a battle, if he used his techniques from such a long distance away, it wouldn't have much power by the time he reached his target. Naturally, he had to close the distance a little and ensure that his techniques were powerful enough. After exchanging blows with Lu Yi, he knew that the other party was a weapon cultivator. In a vast and spacious battlefield like the starry heavens, a weapon cultivator would undoubtedly have the advantage. Moreover, he had seen Lu Yi injured with his own eyes, so he was quite confident that he could win this battle. As for killing the other party, that would be a test of his foundation. After flying for 30 kilometers, Zhao Tianmu came to a stop. With a wave of his hand, 3 spirit treasures appeared beside him: an oil lamp, a ferrule, and a small bell. All of them exuded the aura of top-grade spirit treasures. At the same time, his spiritual power surged as he formed a seal with both hands. 40 li away, Lu Yi was flying over with his saber in hand. His appearance was insolent and ferocious. In the next instant, spiritual power surged around Zhao Tianmu's body. As his hand seals changed, a barrage of techniques flew toward Lu Yi. 40 kilometers passed in the blink of an eye, like a violent storm that drowned out Lu Ye's figure. At Zhao Tianmu's level of cultivation, all kinds of techniques were at his fingertips. Unless there were some powerful secret techniques that required varying amounts of time to accumulate power, there would be no delay. In the tide of techniques, Lu Yi drew his blade and slashed, rushing forward in the face of countless attacks, constantly closing the distance between them. His figure and speed did not slow down at all. The people of the 9 states watched indifferently, but the group of constellations from the Qingli Dao world, and even Qin Yuandai were shocked. Zhao Tianmu was a late-stage constellation cultivator after all. Even if the simplest technique was cast by him, its power would not be weak. In such a dense tide of attacks, normally, an early-stage constellation cultivator would not be able to withstand it at all. Even self-preservation would be a problem. However, there was someone who could move in the opposite direction without being hindered. From this point alone, it could be seen that he had a strong foundation. It was no wonder that Zhao Tianmu had been defeated by him and had fled in a sorry state. In the blink of an eye, the distance of 40 miles had shrunk from 10 miles to 30 miles. It was also at this moment that the pharaoh that had been hanging by Zhao Tianmu's side suddenly trembled slightly and turned into a sky full of ruler shadows, mixed in with the tide of spells, and smashed towards Lu Ye's face. Lu Ye's figure was hindered, and his speed suddenly decreased greatly. He clearly felt a trace of pressure. This was also the helplessness of a weapon cultivator. When a spell cultivator opened up a sufficient distance, he could completely use all kinds of techniques in the process of the weapon cultivator's advance. There were 3 top-grade spirit treasures hanging by Zhao Tianmu's side. Among them, the small bell was obviously used for defense, and the other 2 were for attack. The ferrule had been used, but there was still an oil lamp that had not shown its power. It should not be the time yet. The ferrule shadows filled the sky, changing constantly. Sometimes it contracted into one, and sometimes it spread out into millions. Lu Ye's attacks also became violent. He resisted Zhao Tianmu's many techniques, and unwaveringly closed the distance between them. After a full 30 breaths, Lu Ye closed the distance between them by another 10 kilometers. Now, the distance between them was only 20 kilometers. If he guessed correctly, it was time for his opponent to use the power of the oil lamp. Just as he was thinking this, a light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. The shape of the light was exactly the same as the light from the oil lamp, but it was countless times larger. When this light lit up, a scorching feeling swept in from all directions. Lu Ye suddenly realized that he was wrapped in a ball of flames. End of chapter. Chapter 1370. Raging flames surged, scorching to the extreme, even distorting the air. Then the raging flames turned berserk, exploding with a loud bang. The massive explosion caused Lu Ye's figure to stagger, cutting a sorry figure. By the time the raging flames disappeared, the ruler shadows that filled the sky had already begun to bombard him with numerous spell techniques. Zhao Tianmu's battle experience was extremely rich, and his grasp of the rhythm of battle was also very exquisite. When he used this set of techniques, even Lu Ye suffered a loss. The main reason was that he didn't expect the opponent's oil lamp spirit treasure to be so strange. It could be used from a distance without leaving behind any traces. This set of techniques was something that Zhao Tianmu had been using for a long time, and it was always successful. As long as he could use this set of techniques, he could completely control the rhythm of the battle, slowly establishing his own victory. Lu Ye inwardly sighed that he really couldn't underestimate anyone. Previously, when he was chasing after Zhao Tianmu, he had almost beaten him to the point where he couldn't even fight back. However, once the distance between them increased, giving the opponent time and space to use his techniques, the true strength of a late constellation cultivator was revealed. Qin Yuandai silently nodded as she watched this scene from afar. Although they hadn't fought for long, she could see that this peerless cultivator called Li Taibai was definitely not a match for Zhao Tianmu. Looking at the other 4 peerless constellations, they were clearly somewhat worried. However, the 2 sides had already agreed that no matter what happened in this battle, no one would interfere. Thus, although they were worried, they could only watch from the sidelines. The battle between the 2 constellations became even more intense. On Zhao Tianmu's side, the power of his 2 spirit treasures was released simultaneously, and techniques were constantly being used. Lu Ye also roared in anger, and while blocking the opponent's attacks, he madly closed the distance between them. However, in this kind of battle, the closer they were, the greater the pressure on the weapon cultivator. This was because the closer they were to the magic cultivator, the more powerful their techniques would be. This led to the most direct result. The further they went, the heavier Lu Ye's body became. From the initial 40 li to 30 li, it was practically the blink of an eye. From 30 li to 20 li, it took 10 breaths. But now, 30 breaths of time had passed, and the distance between them was still 15 li. Under Zhao Tianmu's powerful and concentrated attacks, Lu Ye's speed was as slow as a turtle's crawl. The more Zhao Tianmu fought, the more confident he became. Before, he had suffered a loss at the hands of Lu Yi, so he was still somewhat traumatized by this enemy. But now, it seemed that he had overestimated the other party. This might have something to do with the other party being injured. If the stalemate continued, it wouldn't be a problem for him to win. But it wouldn't be so easy for him to kill his opponent. I'll have to use some other means. With a thought, Zhao Tianmu looked in Lu Ye's direction and said provocatively, "You dare to boast so shamelessly with just this little bit of ability? I was wondering how powerful you were." From his observation just now, this Li Taibai obviously had a manic and irritable personality, and his actions were extreme. This was also in line with his behavior of cutting off one of junior sister Sun Ying's arms because of a disagreement. Which normal person would do that? Therefore, he didn't need to do much. He only needed to provoke the other party with a few words, and the other party would definitely be infuriated. Sure enough, as soon as his voice fell, Lu Ye's roar became louder and louder, and a layer of blood mist began to appear around his body. With the appearance of this blood mist, Lu Ye's posture became even more violent. His figure, which was originally unable to move forward even half an inch, began to move forward again, and his aura also began to rise steadily. Zhao Tianmu was overjoyed. Looking at the blood mist that had suddenly appeared, he knew that this Li Taibai had used a secret technique that could temporarily increase his strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't have displayed such a display. However, this kind of secret technique generally had great sequelae, so as long as Zhao Tianmu could stall for time, Lu Ye's strength would inevitably plummet. At that time, it would be a good opportunity to kill him. For this reason, Zhao Tianmu deliberately slowed down his offensive, allowing Lu Ye's figure to break through to within 10 kilometers of him. 30 kilometers behind him, Qin Yuandai was observing with rapt attention, faintly feeling that Li Taibai's aura was rising somewhat strangely. It was too violent, and the color of the blood mist lingering around his body was abnormally dense. Although she noticed this scene, she didn't think much of it, only thinking that this was a powerful explosive method that the other party had mastered. In the starry sky, this kind of method was very common. The Qingli Dao world also had such methods, but they wouldn't use it unless it was a last resort. However, in comparison, the other party's method was stronger. But in the next moment, a scene that shocked her appeared. Zhao Tianmu, who had originally completely occupied the initiative, showed signs of being unable to withstand Li Taibai's sudden outburst. Zhao Tianmu was also dumbfounded. He had just taken the initiative to let Lu Yi within 10 kilometers of him. But who knew that Lu Ye's aura would be so strong that after entering 10 kilometers, he would no longer be obstructed, and would continue to approach him with irresistible force. Zhao Tianmu was well aware of the true essence of fighting between a Dharma cultivator and a weapon cultivator, so he didn't dare to let Lu Yi get close to him. Naturally, he quickly retreated, and while retreating, he used his methods to stop him. The wick of the oil lamp spirit treasure that had been hanging beside him constantly flickered, and every time it flickered, it was a burst of power. The bombardment left Lu Yi with disheveled hair and bruises all over his body, making him look like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, 20 to 30 kilometers passed by in a flash. Zhao Tianmu knew that he couldn't retreat anymore. If he did, he would retreat to Qin Yuandai's side, and what would that look like? Just as he steadied himself and was about to use his methods, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. In the unseen world, there was a feeling of a huge disaster descending, causing his whole body to turn cold. Looking up, he saw that Lu Ye's body was blood red. He held the hilt of his saber with both hands and raised it high, his arms trembling violently. It was as if he wasn't holding the long saber he was most familiar with, but a struggling and twisting dragon. His aura, which was already unreasonably violent, reached a new height in an instant. That aura was so strong and biting cold that it made Zhao Tianmu, who was in the late stage of the constellation realm, feel insignificant. 10 miles behind him, Qin Yuandai also felt a great sense of danger at this moment, because there was an aura that made her heart tremble, that had locked onto her. The situation changed too quickly. When the aura locked onto her, she knew that she couldn't escape no matter what. She also finally realized what was going on with the various strange things that she had observed on Li Taibai's body. Red talisman. Li Taibai actually had a red talisman made by a sunshine cultivator. The rich red light on his body was the sign of activating the red talisman, but it was covered by the blood-red light on his body. She couldn't identify it at first, and the various movements of activating the red talisman were also disrupted by the aftermath of the fierce battle. The main thing was that she didn't expect that in such a place, in such an early stage of the constellation realm, there would be a sunshine cultivator making a red talisman. So that's why. No wonder the other party suggested for the two constellation realms to fight. It turned out that they had already planned to use this battle to activate a red talisman, and the real target of the Wushuang continent was her. So from the beginning, the other party didn't want to be friendly, nor did they want to make friends with the Qing Li Dao world. Everything was just a pretense. Seeing the truth, Qin Yuandai snorted coldly, her expression not panicking. The red talisman was indeed precious, because it was something that only a sunshine cultivator was qualified to make. Moreover, one had to be proficient in the art of talisman making. Out of 100 sunshine cultivators, there might not be one who could make a red talisman. In theory, the maximum power of the red talisman was comparable to a sunshine cultivator making a move. But that was just a theory. In reality, the power of the red talisman depended on the strength of the cultivator who activated it. If Yu Yao had activated the red talisman, she might not have been able to block it. But now, the one who activated the red talisman was only in the early stage of the constellation realm. Even if he used all his strength, how powerful could the red talisman be? Since she couldn't dodge it, then she wouldn't. As Qin Yuandai's mind was filled with thoughts, the Pan Shan saber in Lu Ye's hand was enveloped by the red talisman, and the saber made cracking sounds. He could feel that the Pan Shan saber, which had been with him for many years, and had just been reforged 2 years ago, was already damaged. In other words, with the quality of the Pan Shan saber, it was unable to withstand the power of the red talisman. There were only 2 red talismans that he had obtained from Su Yuqing, and they were of different types. One of them was an offensive red talisman. Once activated, it could unleash a powerful spell. Lu Yi was activating the other red talisman, which was more suitable for a weapon cultivator like himself. Su Yuqing must have specially prepared it for him. All of his previous plans and adaptations were all for this moment of eruption. At this moment, he was less than 20 kilometers away from Qin Yuandai. The moment his aura locked onto her, he swung the vibrating saber. Slash. When the saber fell, Lu Yi felt as if all his essence, qi, and spirit had been sucked dry. This feeling was familiar to him. It was the same feeling he'd felt when he'd used the Dragon Emperor for too long. He forced himself to stay alert, and hurriedly stuffed a handful of spirit jades he'd prepared beforehand into his mouth, his gaze fixed in front of him. Success or failure depended on this moment. The red talisman swept across the sky like a crescent moon. Zhao Tianmu, who bore the brunt of the attack, didn't even have the chance to activate the small bell spirit treasure. When the red talisman swept past, his entire body exploded into fine powder. Then, a scene that left Lu Yi puzzled appeared. He'd thought that after his attack, Qin Yuandai would either try to escape or use some defensive technique. However, the old woman didn't try to escape or activate any defensive techniques. Instead, she reached out to grab the red talisman. Lu Yi was like a lamp that had run out of oil. His vision blurred, and he thought he was seeing things. This old woman, what was she trying to do? Qin Yuandai didn't want to do anything. In her judgment, the red talisman activated by Lu Yi in the early stages of a constellation realm was powerful, but it wasn't enough to threaten her life. That was why she'd made such a move that left Lu Yi confused. However, The moment the withered elder reached out, she sensed that something was wrong. The red talisman's power was much greater than she'd imagined. Chapter 1371. Qin Yuandai retracted her withered hand at lightning speed. She let out a shrill scream and slammed her walking stick. A ghostly domain quickly spread out. This walking stick was another 10,000 soul banner, and its quality was much higher than Sun Ying's. The ghost domain could be used for both offense and defense. It was her only magic weapon for fighting. However, she was still a step too late. The ghost domain had just spread out, and before she could build a defense line, the crescent-shaped red light had already attacked. It cut open the unformed ghost domain and slashed Qin Yuandai's skinny body. His hastily activated protective power was unable to block it at all. Following the explosion of the violent power, a red light enveloped a large area. The aftermath swept across, and Lu Yi, who was 20 miles away, was blown away like a falling leaf. Even Tang Yifeng and the others, who were rushing over when Lu Yi attacked, could not stand steadily. They hurriedly urged their power to resist, and one by one, they were swaying. In the area covered by the red light, life was annihilated one after another, and more than one person died. Obviously, the constellations brought by Qin Yuandai were affected. Lu Yi was pushed hundreds of miles away by the aftermath of the explosion of the red talisman. He barely managed to stabilize his body, and quickly looked in Qin Yuandai's direction. He only cared about one thing now. Was Yu Yao from the Qingli Dao world dead? At a glance, his face was filled with joy, followed by shock. He was happy that Qin Yuandai was dead. Her body was broken into two halves, and blood splashed across the starry sky. Not only was she dead, but also 7 or 8 of the constellations she brought were dead. The rest were almost all injured by the aftermath. Now they were scattered in all directions and looked miserable. The power of the red talisman was beyond Lu Ye's imagination. If he had known this, he would not have tried so hard to close the distance. If he had used it from a distance, Qin Yuandai would not have been able to block it. However, this was the first time he had activated the red talisman. Without experience, he naturally had to play it safe. He was shocked that in the distance behind the surviving cultivators of the Qingli Dao world, a dazzling light was rushing over. Judging from the fluctuation of spiritual power on the other party, it was another mid-stage Yu Yao. This time, 2 Yu Yao came from the Qingli Dao world. Previously, when he saw Qin Yuandai leading a group of constellations, Lu Yi had thought that she was alone. In his original estimation, the other party would most likely only send Yu Yao. However, the other party had actually sent out 2. Moreover, the second one had been hiding in the star boat behind them all this time, and had only shown up at this moment. Lu Yi felt bitter in his heart. Man proposes, God disposes. He had never imagined that they would actually dispatch 2 Yu Yao to deal with a group of early-stage constellation cultivators. After all, there were only 3 Yu Yaos in the entire Qingli Dao world. This meant that they had left 1 Yu Yao behind to look after their home, while the other 2 had run over. How could the 9 prefectures' constellations receive such treatment? Naturally, he did not know that the second Yu Yao following them was just a coincidence and an accident. She did not want to stand up for the dead constellations of Qing Dai Mountain. Instead, she had other plans. That was why she had not shown herself previously. She was prepared to play the villain when Qin Yuandai's side made things difficult for her. In the end, as they waited, Qin Yuandai died. Even the constellations that she had brought along were all dead. He did not dare to hesitate and immediately flew over. Sensing the aura of the second Yu Yao, Tang Yifeng and the others were also dumbfounded. In their original plan, if Lu Yi had succeeded in one strike, they would have swarmed over and gotten rid of the remaining constellations of the Qingli Dao world. However, in this situation, how could they still have a chance? However, the aftermath of the explosion of the red talisman just now had made their pseudo-power spirit inscriptions ineffective. Now that their true cultivation was exposed, they could no longer pose a threat to the newly arrived constellations. After a short while, the old man with an aged face came to the place where the red talisman had exploded. Although he was far away just now, he had been quietly observing the situation here. He knew that Qin Yuandai had been a little careless in her response. Otherwise, she would not have been so unlucky. That red talisman was not an ordinary red talisman at all. It was highly likely that it was a red talisman made by the dwarf clan. Otherwise, it would not have been so powerful. If it was an ordinary red talisman, with Qin Yuandai's strength, she could protect herself. However, if it was a red talisman of the dwarf clan that had been nourished for a long time, no one dared to be careless. Staring at the two halves of Qin Yuandai's corpse, the old man sighed heavily, his eyes full of sorrow. Originally, after 3,000 years, he only had one old friend by his side. Now his only old friend had died, and he had died in the hands of an early-stage constellation. Keep it, the old man ordered faintly. Even the surviving constellations of the Qingdai mountain went forward with lingering fear, and kept Qin Yuandai's corpse with a sorrowful expression. Only then did the old man raise his head and look at Tang Yifeng and the others. All of them were early-stage constellations. Although there were many of them, he did not take them seriously. Then, he turned his head and looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi's cheeks were puffed up. No one knew what he was eating. When he noticed the old man looking at him, he hurriedly swallowed the food. Then, without any hesitation, he turned around and ran. "Scoundrel!" the old man shouted in a low voice. Did he realize that something was wrong and did not even care about his companion? How could his old friend die in the hands of such a villain? It was simply a fool's dream for an early-stage constellation to escape from such a strong person like him. Even if he let Lu Yi run for a while, he thought that he could easily catch up. Just as he was considering whether to kill the early-stage constellations first before chasing after this person, a loud voice came from the depths of the starry sky. "Tang Jun, if you dare to kill anyone from my Wushuang Dao world, I will slaughter the entire Qingli Dao world." Tang Jun suddenly turned his head and stared in the direction that Lu Yi had escaped. In the next moment, his figure swayed and he chased after him. He said faintly, "If you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." To think that he, a mid-stage Yu Yao, was threatened by an early-stage constellation, how could he tolerate it? Moreover, this kid had a red talisman. He might have a second one. It was better to kill him first, especially since he had just activated a red talisman. At this moment, there was a high chance that he was in a state of exhaustion. As for those unparalleled constellations, the people that Qin Yuandai had brought were not all dead. There were more than 10 of them, including late-stage and mid-stage constellations. Although they were not as many as the other party, their cultivation levels were higher, so it should not be a problem to kill them. The mid-stage Yu Yao was extremely fast. Even if Lu Yi saw that the situation was not good and immediately fled, he could clearly feel that the other party's qi momentum had locked onto him from behind. The distance between them was rapidly closing. Seeing that the situation was not good, Lu Yi immediately exploded a drop of essence blood in his body and activated the blood escape technique. At this moment, he did not care about his extreme speed. If he was really caught by the other party, he would definitely die. Naturally, it was more important to increase his speed as much as possible. With the support of the blood escape technique, he quickly broke through his own extreme speed. Lu Yi could only secretly pray that there would not be any sudden obstacles in front of him. He was already in a bad state. If he bumped into something again, he was afraid that he could only wait for death. His luck was not bad. He flew all the way and did not bump into anything. Although there were many meteorites drifting in the starry sky, they were actually very scattered. Usually it was not easy to bump into them, unless they encountered a meteorite belt. Lu Yi lured away Tang Jun, Tang Yifeng and the others. With a heavy heart, they also saw through his intentions. The cultivation of the mid-stage Yu Yao was not something that the people of Jiuzhou could resist. Even if Lu Yi stayed and fought side by side with everyone, he would definitely be defeated one by one. That was why he made a prompt decision to escape. Escaping was not his goal. It was just a means to lure away the enemy's strongest combat power. Lu Ye's side was proceeding very smoothly. As for whether he could escape the pursuit of a mid-stage Yu Yao, no one knew. Tang Yifeng and the others could not do much, and that was to kill the enemies in front of them. It would be best if they could capture a few alive, just in case. After being impacted by the power of the explosion of the red talisman, the 4 fake Yu Yao had exposed their true cultivation. In addition, the tragic deaths of Qin Yuandai and her companions made the surviving cultivators of the Qingli Dao world extremely furious. Not long after Tang Jun left, they took the initiative to attack the Jiuzhou constellations. The Jiuzhou cultivators were still very experienced in group fights. They immediately relied on their advantage in numbers and began to build defenses to resist the enemy's attacks. In the sky near the Wushuang continent, the scene was bustling with noise and excitement. Although they had the advantage in numbers, their cultivation was, after all, inferior. Especially the 2 late-stage Yu Yao cultivators of the other side. Their means were extremely powerful, making it very difficult for the people of Jiuzhou to resist. But they could only persevere. The scene became a little anxious. At the same time, a star boat was rushing toward the Wushuang continent. The star boat was the silver fish, and on the boat was the 3rd batch of constellations that the missing moon immortal had brought over from Jiuzhou. They came a little late and did not make it in time for the previous battle. Inside the star boat, the missing moon immortal drove the star boat while taking out musical notes to try to contact Lu Yi. However, there was no response. At this moment, Lu Yi was being chased by Tang Jun. How could he have the time to reply? She began to contact Jian Guhong again. After a while, she received a response. She roughly knew the situation on the Wushuang continent and what had happened before. After a brief discussion with Jian Guhong, she decided on a plan to defeat the enemy. The fact that musical notes could transmit messages meant that they were not too far away from each other. With the speed of the silver fish, they could reach the battlefield in half a day at most. At that time, their batch of constellations could catch the Qingli Daoist world off guard. Of course, they could not do this with their own strength, but the missing moon immortal had 2 purple amulets that Lu Yi had given to her before. Not only did the missing moon immortal have them, but Jian Guhong, Feng Wujiang, and the other first batch of cultivators, who followed Lu Yi to the Wushuang continent, all had 1 each. Lu Yi had distributed them in case of emergencies. The power of the purple amulet was much weaker than that of the red amulet, but it was more than enough to deal with the constellations. They had been waiting for an opportunity to use it, an opportunity to wipe out the enemy in one fell swoop. The arrival of the missing moon immortal was just right. All of a sudden, the silver fish had rushed to the designated location, and the 9 people of Jiuzhou walked out of the boat. The missing moon immortal gave a few simple instructions, and then activated a secret technique to hide her figure and breath. She quietly moved toward the battlefield, and at the same time, sent a message to Jian Guhong, asking them to get ready. Chapter 1372. Near the Wushuang continent, the people of 9 regions formed a line of defense and struggled to resist the attacks of the Qingli Dao world's constellations. It was fine for a short time, but as time passed, there would inevitably be mistakes. Fortunately, in the aftermath of the impact of the red talisman, these cultivators of the Qingli Dao world were more or less injured. Otherwise, the situation of 9 regions would be worse. A small meteorite flew from the depths of the starry sky and passed near the battlefield. At this moment, the constellations of the Qingli Dao world were all concentrating on their means. Who would care about such a meteorite that could be seen everywhere? However, as the meteorite passed by, a murderous intent suddenly bloomed. They realized that something was wrong and turned their heads to look. A purple light filled their eyes. Nian Yuxian, who arrived at the battlefield with the help of the meteorite, made her move. At the same time, Jian Guhong was also shrouded in purple light. His eyes and divine thoughts locked on one of the enemy's late-stage constellations. The power of the purple talisman bloomed and turned into a waterfall-like attack toward that person. In front of and behind them, there was a sudden outburst of power that far exceeded that of the constellations. The group of people from the Qingli Dao world were instantly stunned and did not know what to do. Especially the 2 late-stage constellations who were targeted by Nian Yuxian and Jian Guhong. They felt like they were being stabbed in the back and instinctively activated their own defensive means. However, Their protective spiritual treasure could not withstand the power of the purple talisman. When the spiritual treasure was broken, the two of them fell one after another. The sudden death of the only two late-stage constellations shocked the rest of the people of the Qingli Dao world. They realized that the strength of this group of enemies was indeed not high, but they actually had the purple talisman, so they did not dare to fight. However, before they could escape, the constellations of 9 regions rushed forward to kill them. The two late-stage constellation masters were the biggest obstacles to 9 regions. Now that the obstacles were gone, the remaining enemies were no longer a threat. With the advantage in numbers alone, 9 regions could completely suppress the enemy, not to mention killing them all. Even capturing a few of them alive was possible. When the dust on the battlefield settled, Lu Yi was struggling to escape. He kept speeding up, far beyond the limit of his control, but Tang Jun, who was chasing behind him, could also do the same, and his speed was faster than him. This led to the distance between them constantly narrowing. Fortunately, he escaped first when he saw the situation was not good. Otherwise, there would be no room to escape. If it was just a simple escape, Lu Yi had a chance to completely get rid of him. His speed was not as fast as the other, but Lu Yi had his own unique escape means. However, Lu Yi couldn't get rid of him completely, because once he got rid of Tang Jun and lost his target, he would definitely return to the Wuxia continent. At that time, the 9 continents constellations who stayed there would be in danger. Therefore, not only could Lu Yi not be caught, he also had to think of a way to maintain this pursuit. It was like fishing, but he had caught a shark, so he couldn't let the shark run away, nor could he let the shark eat him. It was extremely difficult. He was not worried about the sect leader and the others. With the purple amulets that he had given out, as long as they worked well, the remaining constellations in the Qingli Dao world would not be a match for them. Hence, the sect leader and the others would definitely be able to deal with those guys. He only needed to take care of his own side. Surrender obediently and this old man will spare your life. Tang Jun's voice came from behind. This was not what he had said at the beginning of the chase. Instead, he had declared that he would tear Lu Yi to shreds. The reason for such a change in attitude was because he had seen Lu Yi's magical means. He had thought that it would not take much effort to kill an early-stage constellation. But who knew that the other party was as slippery as a loach and could not be caught? The distance between them had been narrowed to 100 miles, which was completely within the range of Tang Jun's means. He had narrowed the distance to this extent many times before, but every time he was about to make a move, something that puzzled him would happen. Just like at this moment, as Tang Jun's spiritual power surged, the figure in front of him suddenly disappeared. Tang Jun immediately spread out his divine thoughts, and soon found traces of Lu Yi in the starry sky thousands of miles away. He quickly turned and chased after him. He had no idea how this young man called Li Taibai managed to do such a thing. Even he was unable to pull off such a miraculous feat. This involved the use of profound energy, which was a level that only sunshine cultivators were qualified to achieve. Of course, it made sense that he used the teleportation talisman. Since the other party had the red talisman, he might have other talismans. However, after several observations, Tang Jun did not find any trace of the other party using talismans. The moment the other party disappeared, there was a flash of a spirit pattern under his feet. Moreover, although the teleportation talisman could be used to save one's life, no one would be so extravagant as to use it so frequently. In addition, the teleportation talisman's direction of teleportation was irregular, and the error in the teleportation distance was also very large. Looking at the other party's means, the distance of a few thousand miles was always slanted to the left or right, so it was impossible for him to suddenly teleport behind him. This was not something that could be explained by the use of a teleportation talisman. Therefore, Tang Jun deduced that Li Taibai must have mastered a method that could allow him to teleport quickly, and this method could cover thousands of miles. If an early-stage constellation cultivator could teleport thousands of miles, wouldn't it be easy for him to teleport tens of thousands of miles, if he mastered this method? It was precisely because of this consideration that Tang Jun's attitude changed. The dead could not be resurrected, and his old friend's lifespan was not long. Even if he did not die in this battle, he did not have many years left to live. If he could really make this boy obediently reveal this method, then his old friend would not have died in vain. Originally, chasing Lu Yi was just a moment of anger, but now he wanted to capture Lu Yi alive even more. Of course, if the other party was willing to cooperate, that would be best. As for whether he could catch up to the other party, Tang Jun was very confident. As long as the other party could not shake him off, then he could forget about escaping. Not to mention other things, just the problem of the other party's spiritual power was something that could not be solved. Especially after activating the red talisman, Tang Jun was certain that this Li Tai Bai would not be able to hold on for long. Thousands of miles away, the moment Lu Yi revealed himself, he sensed a divine sense extending from the distance. Obviously, Tang Jun had discovered his position. He raised his hand and sent out an imperial flying tool to the left, while he flew to the right. He had tried it before, and if he wanted to, he could teleport tens of thousands of miles away. But he was afraid that he would really shake Tang Jun off. So he had always controlled the distance of his teleportation to the extent that Tang Jun could detect him immediately. Although Tang Jun could find his position at a distance of thousands of miles, it would be difficult for him to detect the existence of a small imperial flying tool. So he deduced that Tang Jun must not understand what was going on with his method. Of course, even if he figured it out, he would not be able to effectively deal with it. So he still had to continue chasing. In order to continue keeping this old guy in suspense, Lu Yi had to put in a lot of effort. As for Tang Jun's concern that Lu Yi could not hold on for too long because of his spiritual power, it did not exist. In the short time after activating the red talisman, Lu Yi felt like his whole body was drained, but as he swallowed a large number of spirit jades along the way, the more he ran, the more energetic he became, and the more abundant his spiritual power became. Tang Jun had pinned his hopes on Lu Yi's spiritual power exhaustion, but he had obviously miscalculated. Tang Jun's voice sounded in his ear again, and it was nothing more than the same threatening words. But Lu Yi only treated it as a fart. In this way, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Tang Jun's original calmness had long disappeared, and it was replaced by annoyance and anger. He could not understand how a constellation in the early stage, after activating the red talisman, could still have so much energy to run around. When he first rushed to the battlefield and saw Lu Yi, he clearly sensed that this kid was at the end of his life. So how could he still be energetic as he ran? Logically speaking, it was impossible for a constellation in the early stage to have such a large reserve of spiritual power, even if he consumed a large number of spirit pills in a short period of time. While he was deep in thought, Lu Yi had already made plans to completely escape. 3 days had passed, and the battle on the Wuxia continent must have ended. As long as the constellation of the 9 states still had some sense, they would not come out to look for him, because there was no point in chasing after him. Therefore, Lu Yi deduced that there was a high probability that they had already left the Wuxia continent and were rushing towards the 9 states. There was no need for him to delay any longer. As long as he could get rid of the other party and recuperate for a while, he would fully recover. And with the red talisman in hand, he would not have to be afraid of the Qing Li Dao realm. If he could kill Yu Yao this time, he could naturally do the same next time. There were a total of 3 Yu Yao in the Qing Li Dao world, and one was already dead, leaving only 2. Under the threat of the red talisman, they would not fight to the death with the 9 states. After making up his mind, Lu Ye's mind connected with the imperial weapon he had released. He was about 10,000 miles away, and Tang Jun's figure was 100 miles behind him. Perfect. As his spiritual power surged, the void spirit veins formed under his feet. Just as Lu Yi was about to leave in a flash, he suddenly had an extremely bad feeling. At the same time, the surrounding space shook violently and distorted. The shaking of the space caused the void spirit veins he had created to shatter. This time, he could not teleport away. Before Lu Yi could reconstruct a new void spirit veins, something unexpected happened. The surrounding space was like a mirror that had been smashed to the ground, becoming tattered. Then it began to fiercely collapse towards a point behind him. This change shocked Lu Yi greatly. He instinctively thought that this was Tang Jun's doing, but he quickly realized that this had nothing to do with Tang Jun, because the other party did not show any signs of making a move. He hastily constructed a second void spirit veins, but under the violent shaking of the space, it could not take shape at all. At the same time, an extremely ferocious suction force came from the collapsed space. Lu Yi instantly felt as if an invisible hand had grabbed him. The force coming from behind was so strong that he could not resist, and his entire body was sucked in. The moment his figure disappeared, the only thing Lu Yi could do was to quickly activate his spiritual power to protect himself. Chapter 1373. 100 kilometers behind Lu Yi, Tang Jun, who was chasing after him like a mad dog, witnessed this unforeseen event with his own eyes and broke out in a cold sweat. With Yu Yao's cultivation and a lifespan of more than 3,000 years, in terms of knowledge and experience, Lu Yi naturally could not compare. Therefore, he could see the problem at a glance. This area of space had collapsed. This was obviously a sudden and accidental event. Tang Jun had only heard of such a thing from others a long time ago, and never thought he would encounter it one day. The probability of such a thing happening was simply too small. Seeing that the situation was not good, he quickly stopped and turned around to leave this area. However, the speed of the space collapse was so fast that even though he was 100 kilometers away from Lu Yi, and his reaction was not slow, he still could not escape. Almost at the same time as he turned around, the space around him began to shatter, and Tang Jun instantly felt as if he had stepped on empty air. Immediately after, he experienced the feeling of powerlessness that Lu Yi had experienced before. Even though his cultivation was much higher than Lu Ye's, under the terrifying suction force, he still had no room to resist, and his body slipped uncontrollably into the area of space collapse, following in Lu Ye's footsteps. The two figures disappeared and the space collapse and shattering became even more violent, rapidly spreading in all directions. It was a long time before it gradually subsided. In this part of the starry sky, a huge circular portal appeared, the inside of which was turbid and chaotic, leading to some unknown place. In this chaotic and disorderly place, Lu Yi urged his spirit chi to protect his body, but the effect was weak. A mysterious force that he could not understand was surging in all directions. Under the constant erosion of this mysterious force, his protective spirit chi was broken again and again, and soon he was covered in blood, even a layer of his flesh being scraped off. He slowly realized what had happened. In terms of knowledge and experience, he was indeed inferior to Tang Jun, but for better or worse, he had read a lot of jade slips in the dwarf race's Rest Abyss Pavilion. Comparing his current experience with the records he had read in a jade slip, he naturally understood. He had inadvertently induced the birth of an insect path. The starry sky was filled with dangers, not just from the various star beasts and masters of the various major races, but also some extremely hidden, naturally dangerous places. It was a naturally dangerous place. Normally, one wouldn't be able to see any clues from the surface, but in reality, it was a place where cultivators' expressions would change. That was the place where space was weak. Under normal circumstances, every space was extremely sturdy. No matter how much time passed, there would not be much change. However, the starry sky was vast, and there were always some special places where space was extremely fragile. Some were natural, while some were caused by other special reasons. For example, the nurturing of the insect Tao. The insect path was not directly related to the insects. The insect path was only a name. Strictly speaking, the insect path was a void passage, where both ends were connected to two locations in the vast starry sky. Entering from one end of the insect path would allow one to cross the barrier of space and easily arrive at the other end, saving a lot of time on the journey. In the starry skies, there were many such insect pathways. Many experts would rely on stable insect pathways to achieve the goal of rapidly traveling between two specific locations. The insect path was not an eternal existence. Some were slowly disappearing, while others were being born. The space at the two ends of the insect path that was being born was undoubtedly the place where space was weak. As time passed, it would become weaker and weaker until one day, it would completely collapse and turn into the entrances of the insect path. Lu Yi did not expect himself to be so unlucky to encounter such a thing. There were too many coincidences in this. Under Tang Jun's pursuit, he had coincidentally arrived at this location. This location was coincidentally where the entrance to the insect path was born. He had also coincidentally constructed the Void Spirit Rune here. Under normal circumstances, even if it was a place where space was weak, a cultivator passing by would not cause any changes unless they happened to coincide with the birth of the insect path. However, this probability was not very likely. However, Lu Yi had constructed the Void Spirit Rune. The Void Spirit Rune involved some of the mysteries of space. The moment the Void Spirit Rune was successfully constructed, it undoubtedly caused some changes in this space, causing the insect path's entrance to appear prematurely. That was why this fragile space shattered and collapsed. The insect path's appearance was caused by him. If it were not for him, the insect path might only appear after a few decades or a few centuries. Understanding this, Lu Yi immediately realized that he was in big trouble. When the insect path was first born, it was extremely unstable and could not be smoothly passed through. It could even be said that not every insect path could be passed through. Even if some insect paths had been born for a long time, they were still extremely chaotic inside. Even if Rizhao entered, he would lose himself and fall into it. Most insect paths would undergo a period of evolution and slowly become convenient for cultivators to pass through. No matter what, the insect path he was in was definitely a place that could kill. This was the first time he had experienced such a thing. For a moment he did not know how to deal with it. Carefully recalling the information he had read in the dwarf tribe's jade slip, he quickly calmed his mind and allowed the mysterious power around him to wrap around him. He did not dare to resist. This was because the information recorded in the jade slip said that if he really encountered such a thing, the best choice was to let nature take its course. If he was lucky, he might be swept out of the insect path by the mysterious power. Any resistance would only make the situation worse. At this moment, Lu Yi felt as if he had fallen into the deep sea. There were undercurrents under the sea. One moment, he would be swept in one direction by an undercurrent, and the next moment, he would be swept in another direction by another undercurrent. After a few times, he completely lost his sense of direction. After experiencing it personally, he finally felt the danger of this newly born insect path. If a cultivator fell into such a place, it would be easy for them to lose their sense of direction. Without a sense of direction, even if they had the ability to break out, they would not be able to find a suitable place. As for what the mysterious power that was wrapping around him was, Lu Yi could not tell. Intuitively, it was like a sharp blade, scraping every inch of his skin. His protective spirit energy was constantly being broken in the process. He kept urging it, but the effect was minimal. Several layers of his skin and flesh had been scraped off, and every part of his body was in intense pain. How to escape was the problem he had to consider at this moment. The probability of relying on the strange undercurrent to wrap him up and escape from this place was not high. If he did not try, only death would await him. But what should he do? Just as Lu Yi was pondering, a familiar roar suddenly came from not far away. It was Tang Jun's voice. This guy had actually fallen into this place. Based on his voice, it was obvious that he was urging his power to fight against the surrounding environment. However, it was hard to say how effective it was. Lu Ye's mood instantly improved. If he was the only one who had fallen into this place, and Tang Jun escaped, then the 9 states would be in danger. Tang Jun would definitely search everywhere for the cultivators of the 9 states. The Peerless Continent was only a year's journey from the 9 states. With Tang Jun's ability, it was not impossible for him to find the 9 states. At that time, without him holding the fort, the cultivators of the 9 states would not have the red talisman with them. How could they defeat Yu Yao? Now that Tang Jun had fallen into this insect path, whether or not he could leave this place alive was another matter. How would he be able to find trouble with the 9 states? He finally had a companion. They were truly in the same boat. Tang Jun's voice only appeared for a moment before it disappeared. Both of them were wrapped in the fierce undercurrent, unable to control their bodies. Just now they were not far away, but now Tang Jun was definitely far away. Lu Yi could not be bothered to think too much about Tang Jun. Right now he needed to think about himself. He had only fallen into this place for a moment, but he already felt like he could not hold on any longer. In the end, he was only at the early stage of the constellation realm. He had not even refined the essence of his flesh to the extreme. Although his physical injuries usually healed quickly, it was not to the extent that he could regenerate his flesh. This kind of thing could only be done by refining the essence of his flesh to the extreme and advancing to the middle stage of the constellation realm. Right now, his entire body was covered in blood, and there was not a single part of him that was unscathed. If this continued, he was really going to die. Lu Yi had no choice but to stuff a handful of spiritual jades into his mouth first, then take out the dragon throne. With the scarlet armor on his body, Lu Yi could clearly feel his foundation being continuously devoured. Fortunately, his cultivation level was now high, so he could hold on for a longer time. However, there would eventually be a time when his spiritual qi would be exhausted. He had to find a way to escape before his strength was exhausted. He tried hard to recall the various details of the intelligence he had seen in the jade slips of Resting Abyss Pavilion, hoping to find a suitable solution from them. Unfortunately, he came up with nothing. The omnipresent undercurrent was still washing over them, but with the Dragon Emperor's protection, Lu Ye's body was unharmed. Only the Dragon Emperor was constantly emitting creaking sounds. It seemed that even the Dragon Emperor's armor wouldn't be able to last much longer. After thinking for a moment, Lu Yi had an idea and put away the dragon throne. He activated the power of the talent tree. In an instant, countless tiny roots that were hard to detect covered Lu Ye's entire body. His idea was very simple. The talent tree could devour energy, not just spirit stones and spiritual jades, but even the spiritual qi in a cultivator's body. Then this strange energy in the surroundings, could it also be devoured? If that was the case, with the help of the talent tree, perhaps he could resist the erosion of that strange energy. After some testing, Lu Yi found that his idea was correct. The talent tree could indeed devour that strange erosion power, but the problem was that the speed of devouring was not fast enough. Therefore, in the process of devouring, he would still be injured by the erosion. However, compared to before, it was indeed a little bit lighter. If the talent tree's devouring power was strong enough, it would definitely be able to help him resolve the crisis before him. Unfortunately, it was not yet possible, but soon Lu Yi had a strange feeling. As the talent tree devoured the void spirit runes, he had a strange feeling in his heart. This feeling was unclear, but it inexplicably deepened his understanding of the void spirit runes. That was a strange thing indeed. Chapter 1374. The Void Spirit Rune had been deduced for a long time. Lu Yi first learned the Void Spirit Rune from his master's ancient book. After the second transformation of the talent tree, he deduced the Spirit Rune and made some changes to the details, slowly shaping it. Therefore, the Void Spirit Rune he used now was very similar to the one recorded in his master's ancient book, but it was not exactly the same. Lu Yi had always felt that this Spirit Rune still had a lot of room for improvement. However, his attainments in the Tao of Spirit Runes were not enough to continue improving it, so he could only wait for the follow-up. Unexpectedly, some strange ideas came to his mind at this moment, and the more he urged the talent tree to devour the surrounding scouring force, the clearer these ideas became. Lu Yi suddenly realized that the mysterious force that was scouring him must be related to space. Therefore, when he urged the talent tree to devour them, he had some new ideas about the Void Spirit Rune that was also related to space. Because the two were of the same origin, if this situation could continue, Lu Yi felt that he would definitely be able to deduce an even more exquisite Void Spirit Rune. However, this was not the time to deduce a new Spirit Rune. He originally just wanted to resolve his own crisis, and the current discovery was just an accidental gain. The birth of the insect path was induced in advance by him activating the Void Spirit rune, and the mysterious power inside the insect path was inexplicably related to the Void Spirit rune. Lu Yi vaguely felt that he seemed to have found a way to resolve his crisis. He quickly activated the Void Spirit rune as soon as he thought of it. The spirit rune collapsed the moment it was formed, because the undercurrent that was sweeping around kept scouring him. So the spirit rune could not be maintained for too long. However, as the spirit rune disappeared, Lu Yi keenly discovered that the undercurrent that was wrapping around him had eased up a little, and was not as turbulent as before. Sure enough, the Void Spirit rune was helpful to the current situation. Although it was not to the extent of completely resolving it, it could definitely reduce the damage he suffered. In this way, he could hold on for a longer time. Lu Yi hurriedly constructed the Void Spirit rune again. After the disappearance of more than a dozen spirit runes, the undercurrent that was wrapping around him completely disappeared, as if the strange mysterious power had been eliminated by the Void Spirit rune. But before Lu Yi could rejoice, a new undercurrent swept over him, engulfing him. The feeling of having his flesh and blood sliced away appeared once more. Lu Yi endured the excruciating pain and reconstructed the void. From his previous experience, he realized that he could not let the undercurrent completely disappear, because once it disappeared, a new undercurrent would appear. He had to control himself well. While not letting the undercurrent around him disappear, he had to minimize the damage it would cause him. This will take many attempts. During this period, he could occasionally hear Tang Jun's stern shouts. His voice was initially full of vigor, but it slowly became irritable and angry, and finally became weak. By the time Lu Yi had enough experience to deal with the undercurrents around him, he could no longer hear Tang Jun's voice. He didn't know if the other party was dead or not. But in a place like this, if one couldn't find a way out, and didn't have any means to protect themselves, there was basically no hope of survival. Now, out of the 3 Yu Yao of the Qingli Dao world, one was killed by him, and the other was trapped here. There was only one person left. Before a new Yu Yao was born in the Qingli Dao world, that person would have to stay in this world for a long time. He definitely wouldn't have the chance to cause trouble for the 9 states. Moreover, this time, the Qingli Dao world sent out 2 Yu Yao and nearly 20 constellations, but in the end, they were all wiped out. The people of the Qingli Dao world would definitely think that they had provoked someone they shouldn't have. Now the people of the Qingli Dao world must be in a state of panic. They couldn't even protect themselves. So how could they have the time to find trouble with others? At this thought, Lu Ye's heart calmed down. Even if he was really trapped here, and had no hope of escaping, the 9 states would not have any trouble in the short term. When a new Yu Yao was born in the 9 states in the future, they would have a stronger ability to protect themselves. The undercurrent that was wrapping around him was suddenly replaced by another stronger undercurrent. Lu Yi hurriedly reconstructed the void and repeated what he had done before. The talent tree was still constantly devouring the mysterious power around him. But in this situation, Lu Yi was not in the mood to do the divination. Right now, he was in a situation where he could protect himself and had no way to escape, which was a little uncomfortable. He checked the various spiritual inscriptions that he had mastered and found that other than the void, there was nothing else that could be of help to the current situation. Then he checked his storage ring and storage space to see if there was anything that could be of use. At first, he didn't have any expectations, because he knew very well what he had. Who would have thought that this inspection would actually reveal an unexpected surprise? He took out a snow-white object that looked like a lotus root from his storage space. The heart core of the void beast. This thing was a spoil of war he had obtained from the insect race's tree world. According to Lu Yingying of the fairy race, the void beast was an extremely rare beast in the starry sky. It was born with a very unique spatial ability, which allowed it to travel through the void and go to any place. After death, it would leave behind a core, which was extremely precious. The insect clan had obtained this heart core from somewhere, and placed it in the core of the insect clan's tree world. With its power, they opened up passages to other tree worlds and plundered rare races like the fairy clan. After Lu Yi obtained this item, She had placed it in her storage space. Ever since she returned from the reincarnation tree, she had forgotten about this item. If not for the fact that she had no choice but to look for a feasible solution, she would not have remembered it. This thing might be useful. The insect clan could use this thing to open up connections to other tree worlds, which meant that this thing still had the ability of the void beast to travel through space when it was alive. Now that he was trapped in the insect path and could not escape, if he used this thing, perhaps he could break free from the insect path shackles and leave this place. No matter what, this was still a ray of hope. Lu Yi quickly began to study the heart core in his hand. When he first obtained this thing, he had only examined it slightly and did not observe it carefully. Now that he examined it carefully, he was surprised to find that the inside of this heart core was covered with mysterious and wonderful lines. Lu Yi even found traces of the existence of void spirit inscriptions in these crisscrossing lines. In comparison, the patterns in the heart core were much more complicated than those of void spirit tattoos. In addition to the traces of void spirit tattoos, there were more complicated patterns. This was really the work of nature. The void beast was a star beast and did not have much intelligence. Naturally, it did not know anything about spirit tattoos. However, it was born with the ability to control some spirit tattoos. It could travel through space, and it must have relied on the complicated patterns contained in the heart core. The insect clan had placed it in the tree world. Those divine sea realm insects could activate the power of this heart core, so there was no reason that Lu Yi could not. After a short test, he quickly figured out how to control this thing. It was nothing more than pouring spiritual energy into it to activate the power of the complicated spirit tattoos in the heart core and break the void barrier. Lu Yi was secretly excited and began to try. He poured his spiritual energy into the heart core at a moderate speed. He could clearly feel that the spirit tattoos in the heart core were activated. Then a light flashed out from the front of the heart core and hit the position right in front of him. There, an undercurrent that passed by suddenly collapsed. Then the space seemed to melt. From the point where the light landed, it spread to the surroundings, like a piece of paper being ignited from the center by a spark. Lu Yi suspected that Tang Jun was really dead because he had not heard any movement from him in a long time. At that moment, he suddenly felt a faint spiritual energy fluctuation coming from a certain direction. Apart from him, there was only Tang Jun in this place. Lu Yi hurriedly followed the direction of the spiritual energy fluctuations and finally arrived at the place with great difficulty. Taking a closer look, who else could it be but Tang Jun sitting in the middle of the undercurrent? Chapter 1375. Lu Yi took a closer look and found that this old man was in a much more miserable state than he was. Although Tang Jun was stronger, he had no means to deal with this situation. When he first fell into this place, he blindly charged forward recklessly in an attempt to break free from the insect path shackles. Who knew that he would fall deeper and deeper? By the time he realized that things were not going well, it was already too late to stop. At this moment, Tang Jun's hair was disheveled and his body was covered in blood. However, he did not seem to have suffered any external injuries. After all, he was Yu Yao. Flesh wounds could be easily healed with just a little effort. However, his condition was obviously extremely poor. His aura was as weak as a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. The place where he was standing was enveloped by a light barrier. A small bell hovered beside him. This bell was obviously a protective artifact. The light barrier was also released by this bell. However, when Lu Yi arrived, the light barrier had already dimmed to the extreme. Just like his aura, it was wavering. Tang Jun was clearly an arrow at the end of its flight. Once the protection of this bell was broken, what awaited him would be complete destruction. The only reason he was still alive was because of this bell's protection. It was good that he was not dead. Lu Yi calmed himself down. Almost at the same time that Lu Yi discovered him, Tang Jun sensed something and looked in Lu Ye's direction. He stared deeply into Lu Ye's eyes and said with a calm expression, "Little friend, you're really something. This old master has been defeated this time. However, it seems that you can't escape either?" Lu Yi raised his brows. You think I planned this? You didn't? Lu Yi shook his head. It was purely an accident. Tang Jun did not comment. It was unknown whether he believed him or not. After a moment of silence he said, whether it was an accident or not, this is the end. Now, neither you nor I can escape. This old master will not have a good ending, and you will not be able to survive either. What a pity. What's a pity? Tang Jun smiled faintly. Little friend, you had such a bright future ahead of you, but now you have to accompany an old man like me to sleep here. This old master has not lost out, ha ha ha. Lu Yi was a little surprised by his attitude. He thought that when he found the other party would definitely be furious and come up to kill him. Who would have thought that the other party seemed to have accepted reality? Perhaps it was because he was open-minded, or perhaps it had something to do with his current situation. Tang Jun obviously wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer, and he probably wouldn't have the energy to continue fighting. Let's not talk about whether it's a loss or not. I'm here to make a deal with you, Lu Yi said. Tang Jun was puzzled. Now that things have come to this, why do you still want to talk to this old man? He was about to die. What else could he do? Lu Yi went straight to the point. Do you want to live or die? Tang Jun frowned. Are you threatening me? Lu Yi also felt that his words were a little ambiguous. He raised his hand and said, don't misunderstand. I'm just asking. If you insist on dying, then we don't have to make a deal. If you want to live, then we can still talk. Tang Jun smiled and said, although this old man is already old and doesn't have many years left to live, who would be willing to die if they could continue living? It's just that. Speaking up to this point, Tang Jun suddenly seemed to notice something and looked at Lu Yi seriously, asking in surprise, do you have a method to weaken the erosion of space turbulence? It was only now that he realized something. He, a Moon Jade Realm cultivator, had fallen into this place and was now half dead. So there was no reason for Lu Yi, a star constellation cultivator, to still be alive. He should have died long ago. Looking at Lu Ye's condition, although he looked a little miserable, he was actually in a much better state than Tang Jun. How is this possible? Taking a closer look, the space turbulence around Lu Ye's body was indeed not too strong. With his early star constellation cultivation, he should be able to barely resist it. Tang Jun was greatly surprised. Space turbulence? Lu Yi showed a puzzled look. Tang Jun calmed his mind and said, it's the mysterious power that fills this place, the manifestation of space force. This old man only heard about it from an expert, but I don't know its secrets. Lu Yi understood. Previously, he had felt that the mysterious power that filled this place originated from the word space. The same was true for void spirit veins, which was why void spirit veins could be used here. Looking at it now, this was indeed the case. Little friend, what kind of method is this? Tang Jun's eyes lit up, as if he was a drowning man who had seen a life-saving straw. Truth be told, he had already resigned himself to his fate, because he had already used all of his methods. But in the end, not only were they useless, but they also made him more and more miserable. In the end, he could only summon his defensive treasure and sit here waiting for death. But if Lu Yi had a method to weaken the space turbulence, then perhaps he could still fight for it? The other party had come to find him at this time, and even asked if he wanted to live or die, so he might have some kind of request. Having lived for more than 3,000 years, Tang Jun could be considered to be experienced with age, and immediately noticed something. Lu Yi did not answer his question and instead nodded, saying, it seems that you want to live. Tang Jun said, little friend, are you willing to lend me a hand? What is your request? No wonder this little brat came up to talk about a deal. No hurry, no hurry. Lu Yi calmly sat down not far in front of him, causing the corners of Tang Jun's eyes to twitch. This little brat was not in a hurry, but he could not show it. Before we get down to business, there are some things I need you to understand. As Lu Yi spoke, he raised his hand, and a red talisman appeared in his palm. It was the second red talisman that he had been nourishing in his body. Seeing this, Tang Jun's eyes narrowed slightly. Sure enough, it was as he had thought before. This Li Taibai did indeed have more than one red talisman. It seemed that he had made the right decision to chase after him. Otherwise, if this little brat had recovered his strength and had a red talisman in his hand, even he would have to be wary. Old Tang, you are experienced and knowledgeable. Can you tell the origin of this red talisman? Old Tang. Tang Jun narrowed his eyes and could not help but twitch. After living for so long, this was the first time someone had called him that. Too lazy to argue with Lu Yi, he lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "Red talismans can only be refined by strong cultivators in the Sunshine Realm. However, an ordinary red talisman produced by an early Constellation Realm cultivator, like you, would not have the power to kill a Midyuyao cultivator in one blow, even if the Midyuyao cultivator was careless. In this world, only a red talisman produced by the human tribe can have such power after being nourished in the body of a cultivator. Therefore, this old man boldly guesses that this red talisman was made by the human tribe?" Lu Yi gave him a thumbs up. "The older you are, the more knowledgeable you are. Little friend, are you trying to tell me that you have a way to deal with me by letting me see this red talisman?" "No." Lu Yi shook his head. "I just want to tell you that I have someone above me. The Wushuang continent is a vassal realm of Mount Fengsuan in the east. Your Qingli Taoist world invaded us for no reason and caused trouble first. I killed them because they deserved it. To tell you the truth, all the constellations that Qin Yuandai brought with her should be dead by now. Our Wushuang continent cultivators have more than just red talismans. Mount Fengsuan has given us many purple talismans. Old Tang, do you think those constellations can withstand the power of the purple talismans?" Tang Jun was skeptical. "Little friend, why didn't you mention this before?" He did not believe it, because the human tribe rarely interacted with other races, let alone taking any realm as their vassal realm. This was completely unheard of. However, Qin Yuandai did have 2 red talismans from the human tribe. If he had more purple talismans, then the constellations that Qin Yuandai brought with her would be doomed. According to his observations, the Wushuang continent was indeed a large realm that had just been promoted. Logically speaking, cultivators from such a realm had just set foot in the starry sky, let alone become friends with the human tribe. If the human tribe cultivators did not take the initiative to give them these talismans, it was impossible for them to have red and purple talismans. What's the point of saying it? Lu Yi snorted coldly. In the cultivation world, whose fists are bigger and whose words are louder? Instead of saying it and letting you guess, it's better to say it. It's better to just take action. I originally thought that your Qingli Taoist world only has 3 Yu Yaos. After killing one, the other 2 would probably not dare to invade. Who knew that you were still hiding behind the scenes? Tang Jun was a little speechless. I just happened to be here at the right time and came to take a look. After a pause, he continued. In that case, the 4 of you disguised yourselves as early-stage Yu Yaos with the help of the human tribe's talismans? He had been paying attention to the 4 fake Yu Yaos when the power of the red talismans exploded and their true cultivation was exposed. He was also shocked and could not figure out what kind of mysterious method it was. Lu Yi immediately nodded. Of course, the talismans of the human tribe are infinitely mysterious. What's the big deal about pretending to be Yu Yaos? If it weren't for the fear of scaring you away, I, Wushuang, could even disguise you in the sun. Since they had misunderstood, he might as well let them misunderstand. Of course, Lu Yi would not be kind enough to tell him the truth. Tang Jun did not say anything. After a long silence, he asked, Little friend, how long has it been since your Wushuang advanced to a large domain? 3 or 4 years. Why? Then, little friend, do you know what the place we're at is called? The Insect Path. After Lu Yi finished speaking, he realized Tang Jun's intention and said, There's no need to probe further. I've been to Mount Fengsuan in the east, and stayed in their Rest Abyss Pavilion for a few months. I've read tens of thousands of jade slips that recorded all kinds of information about the starry sky. So don't treat me, Wushuang, as an inexperienced layman who knows nothing about the starry sky. We know everything we need to know. Of course, Tang Jun would not believe him so easily, so he casually said a few more things about the starry sky. It was common knowledge but cultivators who had just advanced to a large domain would never have the chance to do so. Lu Yi answered all the information he came into contact with fluently. Only then did Tang Jun sigh. Your Wushuang is really lucky. When the Green Dawn Dao world advanced more than 3,000 years ago, the first batch of constellations knew nothing about the starry sky. However, after many years of exploration, they slowly integrated into the starry sky. In comparison, the Wushuang continent was really lucky. It had only advanced to a large domain for a few years, but it had already established a relationship with the human tribe. Chapter 1376. With the protection of a top domain like Fengsuan Mountain, the future of the Wushuang continent was promising. It was no wonder that an early-stage constellation had the strength of a late-stage constellation. This kind of person could not be nurtured by a newly promoted domain. This Li Taibai had clearly received great support from the Miniman tribe during his growth, which was why he could have such a strong foundation. I think I understand what you mean. Tang Jun nodded slightly. Don't worry, if you and I can get out of here, the Qingli Dao world will not offend the Wushuang continent again. What happened before will be written off. As you said, they were the ones who started it first. They deserved it if you killed them. The reason why Lu Yi was so long-winded and did not hesitate to use the name of the dwarfs was to get an answer from Tang Jun. However, Tang Jun agreed so easily that he could not believe it. Tang Jun was so smart that he knew what Lu Yi was thinking just by looking at his expression. He said the three top sects of the Qingli Dao world, from top to bottom, almost all of them were wiped out after the battle. Only a few constellations that stayed behind survived. They know nothing about your situation, so they can't take revenge even if they want to. As for me, not only do you have the red talisman in your hands, but you also have a close relationship with the lesser human tribe. As one of the two remaining Yu Yao in this realm, I don't want to bring disaster to this realm, much less stand up for Qingdai Mountain. If I can go back alive, I will definitely restrain the remnants of the Qingdai Mountain. Some things are in the past, and some people are dead. In the starry sky, there are many unresolvable grudges, and there are also many who can forget about it with a smile. I hope it is the latter between the two worlds. Lu Yi said, it better be as you say. Tang Jun said, then can we talk about the deal? You should be able to see that I can't hold on for long. If we delay any longer, you won't be able to find someone to trade with. I should have a way to get you out of here. Tang Jun's expression was calm. What do I have to pay? Or do you have any treasure that you want? I have a secret technique that is used on the spirit, so I need you to cooperate with me. Open up the spirit defense and don't resist. Tang Jun narrowed his eyes slightly. Can this old master ask what effect that secret technique will have after it is used? There's no harm in it. It's just that it'll probably listen to everything I say. Lu Yi replied lightly. In reality, Lu Yi wasn't confident that the soul-control divine pattern would be able to control a moon jade intermediate stage cultivator. There was a massive gap between their cultivation bases. But if he really wanted to use it on Tang Jun, he would need Tang Jun's full cooperation. There was no way to lie about this. Once Tang Jun felt that something was wrong during the process, he would definitely resist, so he had to be willing to do it. Tang Jun chuckled. If that's the case, then there's no need to make this deal. Although he didn't know the intricacies of soul control, he knew what kind of secret technique it was from Lu Ye's explanation. How could Yu Yao, who had lived for over 3,000 years, suffer such humiliation? Lu Yi said earnestly, a bad life is better than a good death. Tang Jun shook his head. This old master doesn't have many years left to live. Even if I don't die here today, I'll die somewhere else in a few years. Lu Yi wasn't too disappointed by Tang Jun's resolute refusal, mainly because he had expected this. If he were in Tang Jun's shoes, he wouldn't have casually agreed to such a request. After pondering for a moment, Tang Jun said, Little friend, since you've come to this old master to discuss a deal at this time, can this old master take it that you can't do it on your own? So you want to borrow this old master's strength? If that's the case, this old master would like to ask little friend to be a little more honest. There are some things that benefit both sides if we cooperate, and harm both sides if we don't. Although little friend is still young, I'm sure you understand this principle. Lu Yi felt a little helpless when Tang Jun's words hit the nail on the head. These old fellows who had lived for many years were indeed very astute. There were many things that couldn't be hidden even if one wanted to. Give me your storage ring, Yi Zichen said. Lu Yi had taken a step back. In truth, it wasn't that he wanted Tang Jun's storage ring. The main reason was that if this method really worked, Lu Yi would feel like he was losing out if he brought Tang Jun out like this. Asking for a storage ring could be considered as making up for it. After all, Tang Jun had Yu Yao, so there should be some good things in her storage ring. Tang Jun looked at him deeply, but didn't say anything. He directly took off his storage ring and flicked it in Lu Yi's direction. Lu Yi raised his hand and caught it. Without even looking at it, he casually stuffed it into his clothes. Only then did he get up and walk towards Tang Jun. How much strength do you have left? Tang Jun smiled bitterly. 10%. With 10% of his strength left, he was really about to run out of energy. Recover first, Lu Yi said. He walked to Tang Jun's side and began to construct void spirit runes to weaken the spatial turbulence around him. Tang Jun observed with rapt attention, and the more he looked, the more shocked he became. He had guessed that Lu Yi had a method to weaken the spatial turbulence, but he didn't know what it was. Until now, an incomparably complex and profound spirit rune was successfully constructed with a wave of Tang Jun's hand, and not just once. With his eyesight and experience, he naturally recognized that this was a void spirit rune. Although it was slightly different from the void spirit runes he knew, they were generally the same. This Li Taibai was actually a spirit rune master, and his attainments in the Tao of spirit runes were absolutely extraordinary. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to construct such a complex spirit rune so familiarly and easily. It turned out that he was using this method to weaken the spatial turbulence. Tang Jun suddenly realized. But even if he knew, he couldn't imitate him. Not to mention that he didn't have a deep understanding of the Tao of spirit runes. Even if he did, he couldn't do it as freely as Li Taibai. It could be said that Lu Yi's attainments in spirit runes had exceeded his understanding. Before seeing it with his own eyes, he really couldn't believe that someone could construct the void so easily. The void spirit runes contain the secret of space, which complemented each other when used here to weaken the spatial turbulence. Hurry up and recover. What are you looking at? Lu Yi urged. My storage ring is with you. Give me some spirit jades and spirit pills. Tang Jun looked at him innocently. Lu Yi was speechless. He hurriedly took out some spirit jades and handed them to Tang Wuling. Then, he rummaged through Tang Wuling's storage ring and found a bottle of suitable spirit pills. Only then did Tang Jun close his eyes and begin to recover. Lu Yi had nothing to do. He looked through Tang Jun's storage ring and was surprised to find that this old man was really poor. Apart from some spirit jades and spirit pills, there were only some random materials and a few decent spirit treasures. Other than that, there wasn't even a single spirit crystal. There weren't many spirit jades either. There were only about 1,000 spirit jades. Lu Yi knew that this was definitely not all of Tang Jun's wealth. Just like himself, he actually had 2 storage spaces. One was his storage ring, and the other was the storage space on the back of his hand. The storage ring usually stored the things that he usually used. The real good things were stored in the storage space. Tang Jun probably also had his own storage space. Putting everything else aside, he should have a few treasures that were suitable for Yu Yao. Spirit treasures were already outdated for Yu Yao. Only star constellations would use spirit treasures. As for Yu Yao's treasures, they were of a higher quality. However, Lu Yi couldn't activate the treasures that belonged to Yu Yao even if he had them. This was because those treasures required Yu Yao's unique, higher quality energy. Since he had already taken one of Tang Wuling's storage rings, it wouldn't be good to ask for more. At the end of the day, this was a cooperation. Tang Jun hoped that Lu Yi could bring him out of this place, and Lu Yi needed to borrow Tang Jun's strength. Time passed. With Lu Yi's help, Tang Jun's strength slowly recovered. However, at the same time, he still needed to activate his energy to resist the corrosion of the spatial turbulence. This caused Tang Jun's recovery to be much slower than Lu Yi had expected. After a whole month, Tang Jun finally recovered completely. He slowly opened his eyes, looking full of energy. "Young friend, what should I do now that I've recovered?" Lu Yi had been waiting for this day for a long time. He already had a plan for what to do next. "I'll need to borrow your strength later. Don't resist." Tang Jun couldn't help but be wary. "Don't tell me you're going to do something to my spirit ocean?" "I won't," Lu Yi said as he stepped forward. He arrived directly behind Tang Jun and slammed his palm down. Tang Jun didn't move, as if he was completely defenseless against Lu Yi. This was because he knew that if Lu Yi really wanted to kill him, he would have done so a month ago. In fact, Lu Yi didn't even need to do anything. He only needed to sit there and watch, and Tang Jun would die without a doubt. Now that Lu Yi had spent so much effort to help him recover, he definitely wouldn't kill him with a single slap. Lu Yi gently pressed his palm against Tang Jun's back. With a surge of spiritual energy, a spirit pattern quickly spread out. A wing-like imprint immediately appeared on the back of Lu Ye's hand and Tang Jun's back. Flying rainbow phoenixes. To be honest, Lu Yi felt a little uncomfortable using such a spirit pattern on an old man like Tang Jun. However, in order to borrow Tang Jun's strength, he had no choice but to do so. He had also thought about whether he should use twin breath and branches. In terms of their roots, the nature of these two spirit patterns was similar. However, in terms of borrowing strength, twin breath and branches was not as thorough as flying rainbow phoenixes. Twin breath and branches was more suitable for many people to work together. The moment the spirit pattern took shape, Lu Yi immediately felt the surging power contained in Tang Jun's seemingly old body. Sure enough, it was as he had seen in some records in Rest Abyss Pavilion. The power in the Moon Jade realm was different from spiritual energy. In terms of quality, it was a level higher. Using this kind of power to activate the heart core of the Void Beast should be able to break through the spatial barrier, right? Lu Yi could feel Tang Jun's foundation, but how could Tang Jun not feel Lu Ye's foundation? He was amazed. On the surface, this Li Tai Bai was only at the early stage of the constellation realm. But in reality, he really had the foundation of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. The spiritual energy in the late-stage constellation realm cultivators in his own domain might not be as dense as his. He really couldn't understand. How did he cultivate? Perhaps this was a talent that only a top domain could cultivate. Chapter 1377. While Tang Jun was sighing inwardly, Lu Yi took out another item. It was the Void Beast's core. Tang Jun tilted his head and looked at it. He couldn't recognize its mysteries. Although he was experienced, Void Beasts were rare. He had never seen one before, let alone the Void Beast's core. He could only guess that this item was the key to escaping. The next moment, he felt the power in his body being mobilized. It flowed into Lu Ye's body through the palm on his back. Lu Ye's expression changed. Although he had guessed that borrowing Yu Yao's power would put him under great pressure, when he actually did it, he realized that he had been too naive. He had only used the Flying Rainbow Phoenix spirit pattern on Thought Moon Immortal before. Back then, the two of them had been chased by Wanzhong Gang from Wanma Ridge's lonely mountain city. Thought Moon Immortal had been seriously injured and couldn't fight anymore. Lu Yi had borrowed her power to stall Wanzhong Gang until Yi and Hupa came to his rescue with the spirit pattern he had left behind, forcing Wanzhong Gang to retreat. At that time, he had been at the True Lake realm, while Thought Moon Immortal had been at the Divine Sea realm. Although their cultivations were a whole realm apart, the power in their bodies was spiritual power. They were of the same nature. Even so, after that battle, Lu Yi had been seriously injured and had fallen unconscious. Because he had used a power that didn't belong to him, he would definitely be injured. If spiritual power of the same nature was like this, what more the higher quality power of the Yu Yao realm? Lu Yi suddenly felt like he could explode and die at any moment. This feeling was familiar. On Mount Fengsuan's immortal spirit peak, when the pearls Su Yuqing had given him had exploded in his body, he had felt this way. Sunshine and Yu Yao's power were of the same nature. He forced himself to calm down and quickly guided Tang Jun's power into the void beast's core. During this process, he could clearly feel that Tang Jun's power was causing damage to his flesh and blood. Even his organs were trembling. This kind of pain was thousands of times more intense than the spatial turbulence scraping his flesh. Lu Yi knew that he had to do something, or he wouldn't be able to hold on. Thinking back to what had happened on the Immortal Spirit Peak, Lu Yi gritted his teeth and activated the power of the talent tree. He began to refine the higher quality energy, and he finally felt a little better. Tang Jun's expression was solemn, and he didn't resist at all, allowing Lu Yi to mobilize his own power. He had a general idea of what Lu Yi was trying to do. He wanted to use his own power to stimulate that lotus root-like treasure. He was only worried about one thing now, and that was whether the young man behind him could hold on. If he could, then there was still a glimmer of hope. If he couldn't, then everything would be over. Although Lu Yi didn't make a sound, the big hand on his back was trembling violently. Obviously, he was enduring great pain. Tang Jun also admired such perseverance and wisdom. Behind Tang Jun, Lu Yi clenched his teeth and held on, blood flowing from his 7 orifices. He had clearly suffered internal injuries. The void beast's core also began to tremble, and he almost couldn't hold on any longer. But he still forcibly suppressed it, not allowing the power of the void beast's core to erupt. This was because there was only one chance. It wasn't that the void beast's core couldn't support more attempts, but that if he couldn't succeed this time, then no matter how many times he tried, it would be useless. He couldn't just tell Tang Jun to cultivate harder and reach the late Moon Jade realm, could he? At his level of cultivation, it wasn't so easy to advance. After half a cup of tea's worth of time, Lu Yi finally couldn't hold on any longer, and Tang Jun's aura weakened. Only then did he let out a low shout, and the front of the void beast's core shot out a beam of light, bombarding the void in front of him. Just like before, as the beam of light appeared, the space in front of him began to melt and expand. Lu Ye's eyes were fixed on this beam of light, ready to move at a moment's notice. Tang Jun also knew that success or failure would depend on this, and his heart was in his throat. Under the two's nervous gazes, the space around them melted faster and faster, and even the surrounding space turbulence became incomparably violent. It seemed that the void beast's core's power had triggered a series of reactions here. At this moment, Lu Ye's injuries were heavy, and Tang Jun was an arrow at the end of its flight. If the violent space turbulence swept over them, even with Lu Ye's void spirit rune, he might not be able to protect them. Amidst the nervous and perturbed weight, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared at the melting space. It was as if a layer of obstruction had been broken open, and a dazzling starry sky suddenly appeared at the original position of the void of chaos. The moment they saw this starry sky, Lu Yi and Tang Jun moved almost at the same time, the two of them rushing forward like hungry dogs, one in front and one behind. Their field of vision brightened, and a vast starry sky appeared before them, no longer surrounded by the harsh environment from before. They were free. Realizing this, Lu Yi immediately fled to the side, and at the same time, Tang Jun also fled to the other side. The two figures, who had cooperated and waited sincerely just a moment ago, instantly flew apart. Cooperation was one thing, but vigilance was still necessary, and both of them were clear about this. After flying for dozens of miles, Lu Yi stopped and turned around to look back. On the other side, Tang Jun also stopped, and with about 100 miles between them, the two looked at each other in dismay. Looking back again, the place where the two of them had escaped from was only a huge circular passage, inside of which was turbid and chaotic. The gap opened by the void beast's core had long since disappeared. This was the first time Lu Yi had seen this insect path with his own eyes, and for a moment he was amazed. But he also knew that this thing had just been formed, and was not stable enough for people to pass through. Perhaps it would be able to in the future, or perhaps it would never be able to. He just didn't know where the other end of this insect path led to. When his cultivation was higher in the future, he might be able to explore it. But at this moment, Lu Yi was not in the mood. Little friend Tai Bai. Tang Jun's voice came from 100 miles away. Lu Yi turned around and saw the old man salute him from afar. "Thank you for this time, little friend. Don't worry. What I said to you before was from the bottom of my heart. The grudge between our worlds is now written off. And in the future, no one from the Qingli Taoist world will offend your world." Lu Yi nodded slightly. That'd better be the case. Several cultivators from the Qingli Taoist world who had done evil in the Wuxia continent were killed by him. And even Qin Yuandai, Yu Yao, was dead. If this matter could be stopped, it would be for the best. At present, the 9 states did not have the capital to be hostile to other large realms. And with the red talisman in his hand and the purple talisman he had distributed, he could only protect himself for a short time. Tang Jun probably believed that he had mentioned that the Wuxia continent was a subordinate of Mount Fengsuan in the east. So from the old man's point of view, it was extremely irrational for the Qingli Taoist world to continue to be hostile to the Wuxia continent. Other things aside, the red talisman in Lu Ye's hand was equivalent to their Yu Yao. If there was a second talisman, who knew if there would be a third? After this incident of being trapped on the insect path, the two of them could be said to have gone through a lot together. With the two of them presiding, the conflict between the two realms could be considered to have ended. "We'll meet again someday." Tang Jun saluted again, turned around and flew out. The old man had used up too much of his energy, and obviously needed to find a place to recover. After watching his figure disappear, Lu Yi turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blood, grimacing in pain. Tang Jun had used up too much energy, but he was seriously injured and had to find a place to heal quickly. He secretly decided that in the future, he would not easily use the flight of the rainbow phoenix to borrow strength from others, as it was not a good thing to borrow too much strength. Half a day later, Lu Yi landed on a desolate star. In the starry sky, there were many such desolate stars, and the environment was usually extremely harsh, not enough to support life. Aside from desolate stars, there were also dead stars. The two were similar in nature, but there were some differences. A dead star might have originally been a realm with vitality, but due to various reasons, the vitality had been extinguished, and all life had been extinguished. That was why it was called a dead star. Hence, the biggest difference between the two was that many dead stars had traces of civilization. Even if there was no civilization, there would still be traces left behind by life. On the other hand, there was nothing on a desolate star. On the desolate star that Lu Yi landed on, wild winds howled, and waves rose hundreds of feet high, and the sky was dark. This kind of environment was undoubtedly very harsh for mortals, but for Lu Yi, it was still a foothold. The main thing was that he could heal here, so he did not have to worry about being hit by the meteorites that could be seen everywhere in the starry sky. He took out a spirit jade and stuffed it into his mouth, then took out a bottle of recovery spirit pills from Tang Jun's storage ring, and refined them as he healed. This time, his injuries were not on the surface, but on the internal organs. When Tang Jun's power passed through his body, it caused great damage to his physical body, and it was not easy to recover. After a full half a month, as his injuries were all healed, Lu Yi suddenly had a strange feeling. With the birth of this feeling, his flesh and blood quickly wriggled, as if it was glowing with new vitality, and he was more energetic than before. And this strange vitality was not only reflected in his flesh and blood. Lu Yi felt that his bones seemed to be soaked in this vitality as well. He was slightly startled, and then he understood. He had broken through. He was no longer in the early stage of the constellation realm, but the middle stage of the constellation realm. The cultivation of the constellation realm was mainly the refinement of one's own essence. The early stage was the essence of the flesh and blood, the middle stage was the essence of the bone marrow, and the late stage was the essence of the organs. In the cultivation process of every constellation realm, the goal was extremely clear, from shallow to deep. Hence, the breakthrough and advancement of the constellation realm did not have any abnormalities, and was always when the time was right. Success would follow naturally. Calculating the time, it had been less than 3 years since he ascended to the constellation realm. To be able to advance to the middle stage in such a short time, the talent tree played a huge role. Without the talent tree, his cultivation efficiency would not be so terrifying. The experience on the immortal spirit peak was also a kind of help. At that time, he had refined a portion of Su Yuqing's power. To Su Yuqing, that portion of power was very little, but to Lu Yi, it was a considerable improvement. Refining Tang Jun's power in the insect path should be the final step. By the same logic, Tang Jun might not have lost much power, but it was enough for Lu Yi to cross the gap between the early stage and the middle stage. Chapter 1378. The ascension of the constellation realm was a gradual and silent improvement, a result of the accumulation of sand over a long period of cultivation. Therefore, the ascension of each minor realm wouldn't bring about any earth-shattering changes to the cultivator. Take Lu Yi for example. He could feel that his strength was much stronger than it was in the early stages, but he didn't have the same feeling of transcendence as before when he crossed a major realm. In the end, it was just an advancement of the same realm. If there was a difference, it was probably that Lu Yi did not have to worry about physical injuries in the future. In the past, his physique was strong and his qi and blood were vigorous, so his physical injuries recovered faster than others. But now, any physical injuries could be healed with just a thought, because he had tempered the essence of his flesh and blood to the extreme. Of course, this kind of recovery would also consume his own strength. After breaking free and advancing to the middle stage of the constellation state, Lu Yi was in a good mood. He did not stay on this desolate star for long, and rushed into the starry sky again. He had to hurry back to Wuxia continent to take a look. Although he felt that after the battle, the constellations of the 9 states would most likely choose to leave the Wuxia continent, and would not lose their minds to track his and Tang Jun's whereabouts. He had to take a look to be sure. Moreover, now that he had reached an agreement with Tang Jun, the constellations of the Qingli Dao world would not invade the Wuxia continent in the future. The Zhenhu and Shanghai that had been scattered by the 9 states could return to Wuxia continent to gain experience. For them, that was the only way to quickly gain military merits. How to go back was a problem for Lu Yi. If he had the star map of this starry sky, he could naturally follow the map. But without the star map, he could only follow some of his previous memories. Fortunately, Lu Yi's sense of direction had always been good. After half a day, he returned to the previous location of the insect path, where he had separated from Tang Jun, recalling the scene of the insect path that day. Lu Yi quickly determined a direction. If he was not mistaken, as long as he flew in this direction, he should be able to find the Wuxia continent. As long as he found the Wuxia continent, it would be easy to return to the 9 states. Along the way, Lu Yi gradually frowned. He felt that he seemed to be going in the wrong direction. When he was chased by Tang Jun, although he did not have the time or the mind to look at the stars around him, he still had some impression of them. However, after flying for several days, he didn't feel the slightest sense of familiarity with the stars around him. It was as if he had entered an extremely unfamiliar starry sky. Lu Yi immediately realized that he was in trouble. Once lost in the starry sky, it would be difficult to find the way back. Just as he was trying his best to distinguish the stars around him and compare them with the memories in his mind, a wisp of killing intent suddenly bloomed. In the next moment, a meteorite that passed by him exploded with a loud bang, and a vigorous figure charged out from it, a cold light shooting straight at his face. Lu Yi had never thought that someone would ambush him in such a place, and subconsciously thought that it was Tang Jun who had gone back on his word. But very soon, he realized that something was amiss, because the person who had attacked him was only at the middle stage of the constellation realm. Change source app. Faced with the sudden attack, he instinctively wanted to retreat. However, before he could do anything, a violent aura blasted from behind him. From the feedback of his perception, he could tell that this was a powerful spell. A pincer attack. Not only that, but there was also a third person who had activated the power of a spirit treasure from the side. The spirit treasure was a large net, and when it spread out, it covered the sky and covered the earth. This was clearly a premeditated attack. Otherwise, the cooperation between the 3 of them would not be so exquisite. The first to attack him was a weapon cultivator. When he attacked, he attracted his attention. The spell cultivator cast a spell from behind to assist him, making it difficult for Lu Yi to advance or retreat. The third person activated the large net spirit treasure. In this way, if Lu Yi delayed or hesitated, he might be hit by the spirit treasure net. At that time, his life and death would not be under his control. The three of them worked together seamlessly. It was undoubtedly not the first time they had done something like this. Faced with such a situation, Lu Yi only had one choice. Almost at the instant he sensed the spell attack from behind, the mountain pan saber was already unsheathed. His figure flashed, and he charged towards the weapon cultivator in front of him. The weapon cultivator had a long spear in his hand, and it emitted a cold light. Seeing Lu Yi charging towards him, he couldn't help but secretly praise him. Unbearably, he was taken down by the three of them in a fluster. He had never met such a decisive person before. However, it was obvious that the other party had made a mistake in choosing him as the breakthrough point. Among the three of them, he was the strongest. Now, he was only a step away from the late-stage constellation realm. On the other hand, the other two spell cultivators were at the mid-stage constellation realm, while the third was only at the early stage. The long spear trembled, and it turned into a cold light that spread out in front of him. In the next moment, the weapon cultivator's expression changed abruptly. As the cold light disappeared, a figure brazenly broke through his attack and attacked him in the blink of an eye. Then, saber light flashed continuously like falling snowflakes. The weapon cultivator could only block the first few slashes before he was completely flustered. The speed and power of the other party's saber were not something he could contend against. The weapon cultivator was shocked. They were both at the mid-stage constellation realm. How could the difference be so great? After 2 breaths, Lu Yi brushed past the weapon cultivator's figure. The spell attack had already arrived, and a huge ball of light exploded, drowning the battlefield. Then the big net spirit treasure also covered over, binding an area of the sky. The chaotic fluctuations of spiritual power gradually calmed down, and the light faded. When the spell cultivator looked carefully, his eyelids could not help but twitch. That was because there was only the figure of his companion in the big net spirit treasure. The weapon cultivator they had ambushed had already disappeared. What made him even more shocked was that his companion had already been beheaded. He had kicked an iron plate. The spell cultivator was also a decisive person. Realizing that he had provoked someone he should not have, he immediately turned around to escape. However, at this moment, an ordinary and powerless imperial equipment suddenly swept past him. When he turned around to look, his vision blurred, and a young man with a cold expression suddenly appeared in front of him. Who else could it be but the weapon cultivator they had ambushed? This person appeared like a ghost. The spell cultivator did not even understand how he appeared. In his shock, he hurriedly urged his spiritual power to use his technique. However, how could Lu Yi give him this chance? He raised his hand and slashed down with his saber. How could a spell cultivator, who was so close to a weapon cultivator, have a good ending? Especially since Lu Yi had just advanced to mid-stage constellation realm, and was much stronger than before. After breaking through his protective spiritual power with 1 slash, and beheading him with 1 slash, Lu Yi raised his head and looked in the direction of the last person. This guy was rather quick-witted. Seeing that his 2 companions had died one after another, he did not even care about his big net spirit treasure, and desperately urged his spiritual power to escape into the distance. When Lu Yi looked over, he had already escaped a few hundred kilometers away, and his speed was increasing. Lu Yi's body was surrounded by a bloody light. Activating the blood escape technique, he turned into a bloody line and chased after that person. More than a month ago, he was still chased by Tang Jun to the point that he could not stop. A month later, he was chasing after someone else. However, this person's luck was not very good. Not long after escaping, he crashed into a meteorite. When the meteorite shattered, this person was also dizzy from the impact. His face was covered in blood, and he no longer had the strength to escape. This was the hidden danger of flying faster than one's own speed in the starry sky. Lu Yi rushed over, and did not make any threatening movements. He just looked at him quietly. This person knew that there was no way to escape, so he did not do anything useless. His face was full of bitterness. Looking at this person up close, he looked evil and was not a good person. His face was extremely pale. This paleness should not be the result of hitting the meteorite just now, but it was originally like this. It was quite a feeling of excessive indulgence. After a while, Lu Yi slowly said, "I ask you answer. Understand?" "Understood." The pale-faced man kept nodding. His two middle-stage companions were like little chicks in front of this person. They were almost killed without the power to fight back. He also knew what kind of person he had provoked. He secretly speculated that this person in front of him was most likely a demon from a top region. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to have such strong strength. Facing such an existence, the pale-faced man had a natural sense of fear. Coupled with the fact that the situation was not good, how could he dare to resist? "Qingli Dao world?" Lu Yi said. The only person who would ambush him could only be someone from the Qingli Dao world. Was it because Tang Jun did not convey the previous agreement, or the other party did not intend to reconcile with the 9 regions at all? Lu Yi had to figure this out. Bing or QQ browser searched for the 3 excellencies plus book titles every day. However, what Lu Yi did not expect was that the other party shook his head. "No." Lu Yi frowned. "Which region are you from?" "Ancient Cold World." Never heard of it. He had never heard of it before. But it was normal for there to be many realms within the same galaxy. Before he came into contact with the people from the Qingli Dao world, the 9 states did not know about the existence of the Qingli Dao world. The 9 states must be in more than one galaxy. Where is the Ancient Cold World? Lu Yi asked again. The Ancient Cold World is in the Dongsu galaxy. Lu Yi was stunned. Suddenly, he had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Could it be that this is the Dongsu galaxy? Otherwise, how could he have met someone from the Ancient Cold World? The direction in his memory was obviously right. But why were the celestial bodies he encountered along the way extremely strange? This was not a problem of him being in the wrong direction at all. This was a problem of him coming to a strange galaxy. Insect path. He used the core of the void beast to escape. He thought that he had returned to the place where he had fallen. Now it seemed that was not the case at all. He should have come to the other end of the insect path. Even with Lu Ye's strong will, his body could not help but tremble. This was too troublesome. This is not the Dongsu galaxy. The pale-faced man looked at Lu Yi with a strange expression. He did not understand why Lu Yi did not know where he was when he was already here. Then where is this? Lu Yi asked with a trace of hope and anxiety. This is the Wanxiang galaxy. His hope was completely shattered. Chapter 1379. The vast starry sky was boundless and limitless. Since ancient times, cultivators had divided the boundless starry sky into many galaxies in order to accurately determine their location. The starry sky was a whole, and the galaxies were part of it, just like how the military province was to Jiuzhou. Lu Yi was not clear about the specific standards for the division of galaxies, but he knew that the galaxy where Jiuzhou was located was called the Jade Conch Galaxy. He had learned this information when he was reading the Jade Slips in the Shiyuan Pavilion of the human clan. Later, he had confirmed it when he spied on Sun Ying's soul. The name of a galaxy basically depended on the most powerful realm in the galaxy. It was named after the most powerful realm in the galaxy. In the Jade Conch Galaxy where Jiuzhou was located, there was a Jade Conch boundary. It was the strongest realm in this galaxy, much stronger than the Qingli Dao world. If Jiuzhou could one day rise above the Jade Conch boundary and become the boss of the galaxy, it would be qualified to change the galaxy's name to Jiuzhou. Just like the Dongshu galaxy mentioned by the white-faced man, there was a high probability that there was a realm similar to the Dongshu realm. Of course, not all galaxies were named according to this standard. There were always some exceptions. Just like the Wanxiang galaxy, Lu Yi had no impression of the Dongshu galaxy mentioned by the white-faced man. Although the information recorded in the Shiyuan Pavilion was vast and varied, there were always some omissions. He was sure that he had not seen any records about the Dongshu Galaxy in the Shiyuan Pavilion. However, he had seen records about the Wanxiang Galaxy. This was because this galaxy was very famous. It was a place where cultivators from all over gathered. It could be said that this place was the center of hundreds and thousands of galaxies around it. The biggest reason why this place was so grand was because of the insect path. Insect paths were everywhere in the starry sky. Other galaxies might have them, but there would not be many of them. However, the Wanxiang Galaxy was different. There were hundreds and thousands of insect paths here, and most of them were safe for people to pass through. One end of these insect paths was in the Wanxiang Galaxy, while the other end was connected to other galaxies. As a result, it was easy for cultivators from other galaxies to travel to and from the Wanxiang Galaxy. No one knew why this place was so special. However, this galaxy had been like this since ancient times. It could only be said that it was the work of nature. When Lu Yi had seen the records of the myriad phenomenon galaxy in Rest Abyss Pavilion, he had even thought that if he had the chance one day, he would definitely come here to take a look. He never thought that this opportunity would come so abruptly that he wasn't prepared at all, and suddenly came here. It was laughable that he thought he was still in the Jade Conch Galaxy, and wanted to find a way back to Wushuang, or the 9 prefectures. Change source app. They had already run to another star system, so how could they find their way home? The pale-faced man came from the Cave Void Galaxy, while his 2 companions came from other galaxies. They came from different backgrounds, but because they had similar temperaments, they had teamed up to hide in the vicinity and rob people. Lu Yi had been so focused on comparing her surroundings with her own memories that she had let down her guard, allowing her to be ambushed. When the 3 of them joined forces, they had also carefully chosen their opponents. They didn't dare to provoke those who were in a group, because they wouldn't be able to defeat those who were too strong. Lu Yi was alone, and his cultivation was neither high nor low. He was undoubtedly their best choice. Before this, they had already succeeded several times. Who would have thought that this robbery would fail, and they would be killed instead? They were really unlucky. Dao brother, what else do you want to ask? The pale-faced man saw Lu Ye's uncertain expression and felt uneasy. Lu Yi looked up at him. Do you have any friends nearby? The pale-faced man pretended to be calm. No. Then why are you stalling for time? When Lu Ye's voice fell, the mountain blade had already slashed out. The pale-faced man immediately shouted and madly urged his spiritual power to activate his protective spiritual treasure. However, he was still a step too late, mainly because he didn't expect Lu Yi to suddenly kill him while he was still asking questions. He was indeed stalling for time, and he had already sent out the message. Their group had more than 3 people, and there were 3 teams. The other 2 teams were nearby, and he didn't need to stall for too long. He only needed an incense stick's worth of time, and his companions would rush over after receiving the news. However, he didn't expect Lu Yi to see through him. He just felt that this guy was a bit strange, being so cooperative in a life-and-death situation. Normal people would either fight to the death or beg for mercy, but this guy answered all of his questions without begging for mercy. This was clearly abnormal. He was already in the constellation realm, so he wasn't someone those inexperienced Cloud River True Lake cultivators could compare to. Moreover, since his opponent had already attacked him, he naturally wouldn't show mercy. Blood spurted out, and the pale-faced man followed in his companion's footsteps. Lu Yi put away his storage ring and lowered his head to look at his mountain blade. He frowned slightly when he saw cracks crisscrossing the blade. When it rains, it pours. Misfortune seeks out the unfortunate. It was one thing for him to accidentally enter the myriad phenomenon galaxy, but the mountain blade was also a bit overwhelmed. This was caused by the red talisman's power. Activating the red talisman's power put too much pressure on the mountain blade. At the time, he felt that there was something wrong with his blade, but he didn't have the time to investigate. Just now, he had used the blade to kill 2 people, so the problem was even more serious. His figure flickered and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the place where the weapon cultivator had died. After killing the enemy, he had to seize the spoils of war. This wasn't something he would forget, So he purposely left his imperial artifact here, so that he could collect it when he returned. Similarly, there was also an imperial artifact next to the dead weapon cultivator. Not long after Lu Yi finished packing up and left, two groups of people rushed from different directions to the place where the pale-faced man had died. However, they were still a step too late. Even if they wanted to investigate, they didn't know where to start. Moreover, this group of people came from different galaxies, and even different races. They had only gathered for their own interests, and didn't have much friendship between them. Who would insist on avenging the dead? In the starry sky, Lu Yi was alone, holding 3 star maps in his hands. These were the star maps of the Wanxiang galaxy. The 3 people he had killed each had a copy. After comparing them, it could be seen that these 3 star maps were more or less the same, but there were some subtle differences. This was normal. Star maps were not like the maps in the domain. The positions of the various celestial bodies in the starry sky would often change. Perhaps powerful cultivators would destroy the celestial bodies in battle, or perhaps new celestial bodies would be born. Since the time of obtaining the star maps was different, the details would naturally be different. However, each one could be used. With this star map, Lu Yi could go to any place in the Wanxiang galaxy without worrying about getting lost. After a careful inspection, he confirmed his current location. He was roughly at the outskirts of the Wanxiang galaxy. He wasn't in a hurry to go anywhere. Instead, he returned along the path he had come from and carefully memorized his current location, according to the star maps. A few days later, Lu Yi finally returned to the insect path. The reason he returned was naturally to record the exact location of the insect path. At present, this insect path was his only hope of returning to the Jade Conch galaxy. However, this insect path wasn't stable yet, so he couldn't pass through it. From afar, Lu Yi saw a person standing in front of the insect path, seemingly in melancholy and contemplation. Lu Yi's expression brightened, and his original depression suddenly dissipated a lot. If there was anything in this world that could make him happy when he was unlucky, it was meeting a fellow who was equally unlucky. It seemed that all the depression in his heart had been shared. That person also noticed Lu Yi's arrival, and turned his head to look at him. When their eyes met, they could see the helplessness in each other's eyes. Little friend Tai-bai. Tang Jun nodded slightly. Lu Yi flew forward, not too wary of this old man. They were all in the same boat, so there was no need to make things difficult for each other. Old Tang, since you're here, do you realize the seriousness of the problem? Lu Yi asked. It seems that you've realized it too. Tang Jun sighed. I didn't expect to have the opportunity to come to a galaxy like this in my lifetime. I've long heard of the Myriad constellation, but unfortunately, I've never had the chance to see it. Great, now that I'm old, I have to travel so far away. He knew this was the Myriad constellation not because he had the same experience as Lu Yi, but because it was the Moon Jade realm. Normally, no one dared to provoke it, but if he encountered a cultivator from another galaxy, he would know his situation after asking around. Lu Yi said decisively, It's my fault, it's my fault. Tang Jun shook his head. It's fate, there's no one to blame. Lu Yi said, Old Tang, did you come here to return through the insect path? This old man wants to go back. I'm old, so I want to return to my roots. Who would want to wander outside? However, the insect path is unstable right now, so it's not appropriate to rashly venture deeper. We were lucky to be able to come here through the insect path. If we try again, we might not be able to reach the other end of the insect path. No one knows where we'll end up. If we end up in some remote place, the situation will only worsen. Lu Yi nodded. I think so too. It was just a coincidence that they broke through the spatial barrier with the help of the Void Beast's core and arrived here. This kind of coincidence could not be controlled by humans. Just as Tang Jun said, it would be terrible if they ended up in some remote place. It was better to stay here. At the very least, the insect path to the Jade Conch galaxy was here. If they were lucky, maybe the insect path would stabilize after a few years. At that time, the two of them could safely return to the Jade Conch galaxy. In comparison, Tang Jun was undoubtedly more eager to return to the Jade Conch galaxy. He was already old, So he did not have the drive of a young man like Lu Yi. He only wanted to live out the rest of his life in peace. In this unfamiliar environment, his adaptability was naturally not as good as Lu Ye's. We don't have to wait for the insect path to stabilize, Tang Jun said. Lu Yi asked, "What do you think?" Tang Jun said, "There are many insect paths in the myriad constellation that lead to many places. There must be a galaxy close to our Jade Conch galaxy. Perhaps the cultivators there have heard of the Jade Conch galaxy. We just need to gather this information and find the insect path to that galaxy. Then we can use it to return to the Jade Conch galaxy." Chapter 1380. This method was more troublesome, but it was better than waiting here for the path to stabilize. It was hard to say if the path could even stabilize. Even if it could, who knew how many years it would take? It might take a few years, a dozen years, or even hundreds or thousands of years. It was impossible to make an accurate judgment. I heard that there's a 10,000 elephant sea here. It's a place where cultivators from all over the world gather. Tang Jun said, "We need to find someone to find out where the 10,000 elephant sea is. Let's go there first." If they wanted to gather information, it was naturally more convenient to go to a place with more people. Lu Yi casually tossed a star map to him. Tang Jun caught it and looked at it. Then, he turned around and looked at Lu Yi speechlessly. The two of them had only been in the 10,000 elephant galaxy for a few days. Even Yu Yao didn't have a star map of this galaxy, but Lu Yi did. This was very thought-provoking. Moreover, judging from the way Lu Yi attacked, he probably had more than one star map. How long had it been? This brat had already started a massacre? He calmed himself down and carefully examined the star map. Then he turned around and looked in a certain direction. It should be over there. Let's go. With that, he took the lead and flew out. Lu Yi followed closely behind. After a while he said, "Old Tang, are we going to fly there like this?" Tang Jun turned to look at him. "Then why don't you carry me? I'm old, and my legs are inconvenient. You're young and strong, so it's only right for you to put in more effort." Lu Yi resisted the urge to draw his saber. "Don't you have anything that can increase your speed, like a planetary boat?" Tang Jun said in annoyance. "You took my storage ring. Where would I get a planetary boat?" Lu Yi didn't say anything. He just stared at him. Lu Yi didn't believe that the old man didn't have a planetary boat. Even Zhao Tianmu, who was in the late constellation realm, had a planetary boat. After flying for a while, Tang Jun probably also felt that it was a waste of time to fly there like this. So he put on a look of realization. "If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. I'm old, so my memory is really bad." As soon as he finished speaking, he threw out a planetary boat. It looked similar to a silver fish, but it wasn't as big. It could only accommodate 3 to 5 people at most. Tang Jun took the lead and boarded the boat, and Lu Yi followed closely behind him. Feel left and right. Look right now that Yin was with the Thought Moon Immortal, and he didn't have any other planetary ships with him. It would be inconvenient for him to travel in the myriad phenomenon galaxy without a companion. "Old Tang. Don't even think about it. This is the only one I have." "Yu Yao, you're so old. Why would you care about such a small thing?" Tang Jun laughed in exasperation. When he was fighting against Lu Yi, he only felt that this kid was ruthless. But now that they were in the same boat, he realized just how shameless he could be. Even the people of the Jade Conch galaxy could hear the sound of the abacus. "In any case, don't even think about it. I can't give it to you." Tang Jun's attitude was firm. Lu Yi curled his lips, walked to the side and sat down cross-legged. Tang Jun could still vaguely hear him saying something like stingy. Along the way, the surrounding airspace gradually became lively. From time to time, they would encounter some cultivators passing by. Some of these cultivators were flying through the air, while others were riding on spirit boats. Most of them were in groups and very few were alone. Lu Yi was dazzled by the myriad of strange shapes and sizes of the spirit boats. The further they went, the livelier the surrounding airspace became. Moreover, all the people they saw were on the constellations. Occasionally, they would sense the aura of the Yu Yao realm. This galaxy was really full of constellations, and there were as many Yu Yao as there were dogs. The grand scene of cultivators gathering here was an eye-opener for Lu Yi and Tang Jun, who came from a remote place. And this was only the periphery of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. They wondered what kind of grand scene it would be when they entered the legendary 10,000 Elephant Sea. When there were too many people, it was easy to cause trouble, especially when the cultivators coming and going came from hundreds or thousands of different galaxies. Everyone lived on the edge of a knife, and fierce battles were unavoidable. Along the way, they encountered at least a dozen battles, big and small. Tang Jun sensed them from afar, and steered his star boat to avoid them. This was also common sense when traveling in the universe. If there was a battle, don't approach it rashly. Otherwise, it would easily arouse the hostility of both sides. If a group of people attacked you, the scene would not be pleasant. From afar, the two of them saw a strange scene in the starry sky. In the distant starry sky, a vast expanse of blue covered a large area, as if there was a vast ocean suspended in the starry sky. It was a magnificent sight. They had arrived at the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Although the 10,000 Elephant Sea was called a sea, it could exist in the starry sky. Naturally, it was not a real sea. According to the records in the Miniman tribe's Jade Slip, the 10,000 Elephant Sea was the first of the 3 wonders of space in the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy. It was also the origin of the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy's fame in the entire galaxy. In the vast and boundless starry sky, there were countless wonders, and each of them had a myriad of forms. The 10,000 Elephant Sea was only one of them. From afar, the 10,000 Elephant Sea did not seem very large, but as they got closer, they could feel its magnificence. Such a wonder covered an area of billions of miles. Its existence alone occupied almost a tenth of the entire 10,000 Elephant Galaxy's scale. It was obvious how huge it was. However, compared to the other wonders in the starry sky, the 10,000 Elephant Sea's scale was actually not large. According to the records in the Miniman tribe's Jade Slip, some of the wonders in the starry sky could even cover an entire galaxy or several galaxies. If a constellation realm expert entered it, even if they rode a star boat like the Silver Fish, it would still take them several years to pass through it. An old man and a young man stood side by side on the star boat, feeling the oppressive feeling brought by the huge ocean from afar. Both of them were speechless for a long time. "My young friend Tai Bai," Tang Jun suddenly said, "I've thought about it, and I think we should split up. In this way, we can take care of each other in secret. Even if one of us runs into trouble, we won't be without help. What do you think, my young friend?" Lu Yi pondered for a moment and said, "I think what you said makes sense." Suddenly coming to this unfamiliar place where experts gathered, it was indeed not suitable for them to move together. It would be more efficient if they split up. Moreover, it was just as Tang Jun had said. If something happened to one of them, the other could secretly lend a helping hand. If they stayed together, it would be easy for them to be wiped out. Tang Jun took out his musical note and handed it to Lu Yi. "Let's exchange our musical notes. It'll be easier for us to contact each other if something happens." Lu Yi did as he said. After a short while, he withdrew his musical note and leaped off the star boat. As Tang Jun's star boat sped off into the distance, his words echoed out from afar. "I'll inform you as soon as I receive any news. I'll take my leave now." Lu Yi watched as Tang Jun's star boat disappeared from his sight, and then slowly flew in the direction of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Tang Jun must have his own reasons for splitting up with him. The reason he gave was probably only part of it. The most likely reason was that he didn't want Lu Yi to get him into trouble. Tang Jun must have sensed something from the star map Lu Yi had given him. For an old man like him, who had one foot in the grave, what he pursued most was stability. It was natural that he would feel uncomfortable staying with a young man like Lu Yi, who was prone to fighting and killing. Lu Yi didn't point it out, because it was indeed more effective to split up. Besides, even though the two of them were from the same galaxy and shared the same fate, their relationship wasn't good enough for them to travel together. As he flew, Lu Yi touched his right wrist. In fact, he had a way to leave the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy, and that was to activate the mark given to him by the reincarnation tree. In this way, he could directly enter the reincarnation tree. At that time, he could ask the reincarnation tree about the location of the 9 states, and he should be able to find the way home. If there was anyone who knew this galaxy the best, it would be the reincarnation tree. Its doppelgangers were spread all over the realms of the major galaxies, and it knew every galaxy like the back of its hand. However, Luyi didn't know how far the reincarnation tree was from the 9 states, and how many galaxies they would have to pass through on the way home. Even if he knew the way home, it wouldn't be worth it if it took hundreds or thousands of years. Luyi kept this method as a backup. In comparison, Tang Jun's suggestion was the fastest. He could scout out the galaxies adjacent to the Jade Conch galaxy, and then use their insect paths to travel. This way he could return faster. After flying for a few more days, he gradually approached the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The 10,000 Elephant Sea was a 3-dimensional existence. To some extent, Luyi could enter it from any direction. But in fact it wasn't that simple. The gathering of the starry sky's energy. If that was the case, then this was definitely a treasured place for upper realm cultivators to cultivate. This was because upper realm cultivators needed to absorb and refine the starry sky's energy. Spirit jades and spirit crystals could be seen as the condensation of the starry sky's energy. However, the 10,000 Elephant Sea's water didn't just contain the starry sky's energy that was useful to cultivators. As a starry sky wonder that had been born since ancient times, it had its own unique rules that operated. Simply put, the seawater here was far more corrosive than the usual starry sky's energy. Even upper realm cultivators couldn't resist this kind of corrosion. Therefore, if one rashly entered the sea, even upper realm cultivators wouldn't be able to withstand it for too long. Once too many impurities were corroded in the body, it would inevitably affect one's foundation. If it was light, one's vitality would be greatly damaged, and if it was heavy, one's cultivation would drop. As a result, even though the vast 10,000 Elephant Sea gathered the starry sky's energy that upper realm cultivators coveted, no one dared to enter it. Cultivators entered the 10,000 Elephant Sea from the sky. Luyi flew in from the edge of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. From afar, he saw the scattered islands on the surface of the sea. These islands were born at the same time as the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Each island could withstand the corrosion of the seawater for countless years. It could be said that they were incomparably sturdy. Even sunshine powerhouses couldn't easily destroy them. Cultivators from the 4 galaxies used these islands as their foundation. Over countless years, the cultivators here had maintained the prosperity of this place from generation to generation. Normally speaking, there were no restrictions on the lunar constellations coming here, nor would they be subject to any checks. They could come and go as they pleased. However, if Yu Yao came here, she would first have to report to the local star system's Rizhao and explain her origins. Only then would she be allowed to stay. Therefore, Luyi guessed that Tang Jun was currently being interrogated by Nicho of the Vientiane galaxy. As for whether or not Tang Jun would reveal his existence during the interrogation process, Luyi did not have to worry. Nicho of the Vientiane galaxy was only responsible for overseeing this place and would not interfere. At their level of cultivation, they were too lazy to care about the quarrels of the cultivators below them. Referring to the star map in his hand, Luyi chose his destination. At the center of the Wanxiang Sea was the largest island, the Wanxiang Island. This was the foundation of the myriad phenomenon galaxy's local cultivators. Since it was the largest, it was bound to be the liveliest place. He needed to gather information and deal with some other matters. Naturally, he would choose a place like this. He also wanted to familiarize himself with the Wanxiang Island. There were many cultivators coming and going, and they came from all kinds of strange races. Some looked like uncivilized demons, some did not look human at all, and some did not even have a specific shape. Luyi had seen many big scenes before, but he still clicked his tongue in wonder at this moment. He skimmed across the sea, avoiding one island after another, as he slowly approached the Wanxiang Island. At this speed, Lu Yi estimated that it would take him about half a month to reach the Wanxiang Island. He felt very helpless. Just as he was hurrying on with his journey, a stream of light suddenly flew over from the side. Lu Yi had been in a state of alert all this time. When he saw this, he immediately stopped and looked over coldly. The stream of light came to a sudden stop in front of him. When the light dissipated, an extremely small spirit boat appeared in Lu Ye's field of vision. This spirit boat was even smaller than Tang Jun's. It could only fit 3 people. Li said, "Greetings, Taoist brother. What's the matter?" Lu Yi pressed his hand on the hilt of the Pan Shan saber, with a serious expression. The young man opposite him looked young, about the same age as him. What was rare was that he actually had an early-stage star constellation realm cultivation. This kind of person must have a good background, and his aptitude should also be good. Lu Yi did not know why he stopped him. "Taoist brother, you seem to be in a hurry. Are you hurrying to the Wanxiang Island?" The young man was still smiling, revealing his white teeth. It was easy to feel that he was harmless. Lu Yi did not let down his guard. He shook his head decisively. "No." Under normal circumstances, this kind of person who came to strike up a conversation for no reason was up to no good. Lu Yi was new here, so he naturally did not want to be entangled with them. However, the young man did not retreat. He should have encountered a similar situation before. He said skillfully, "Taoist brother, you don't need to be cautious. I am a ferryman under the Wanxiang Merchant Guild. I am responsible for transporting people like you who are in a hurry." As he said this, he pointed at the side of his ship. Lu Yi looked over. Sure enough, he saw the words Wanxiang written in large letters there. The young man pointed in another direction. "Taoist brother, please take a look. This is what we ferrymen do. It is mainly to make it more convenient for those who don't have a ship to travel between the big islands and save time." Lu Yi turned his head again and saw a ship that was exactly the same as the one the young man was on. It also had the words Wanxiang written on the side of the ship, and there were cultivators riding it. He had noticed the existence of this kind of ship before. Moreover, there was not just one, but several of them. He had thought that this kind of small ship was popular here, but now it seemed that this was not the case. This ship was specially used to ferry people. The so-called Wanxiang Merchant Guild was very thoughtful. After all, the number of cultivators who owned a ship was very small. The production cost of this thing was very high, and ordinary star constellation realm cultivators could not afford it. Even if they could afford it, they might not be able to bear to buy one. After all, star constellation realm cultivators also needed spirit jades to cultivate. However, Lu Yi knew that this thing was definitely not free. They would probably charge a certain amount of money. "How much?" Lu Yi asked. The young man replied with a smile. "It depends on where you are going. We ferrymen charge according to the distance. To the island of Wanxiang, 10 spirit jades please." Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. This price was not expensive. His figure flashed, and he landed on the ship. He took out 10 spirit jades and handed them to the young man. The young man took the spirit jades, and his mood became cheerful. "Brother, please stand still." With that, he turned the ship around and flew toward the island of Wanxiang. On the way, Lu Yi asked, "How did you know I was going to the island of Wanxiang?" The young man replied with a smile, "Because I saw that this should be your first time in the Wanxiang Sea. Let me put it this way. If you knew a little about this place, you would have taken the initiative to look for us ferrymen. Since you didn't, either you are embarrassed or you don't know anything about this place. I see that you have an extraordinary temperament, and you don't seem to be a person who is reluctant to part with a few spirit jades. This should be your first time in the Wanxiang Sea. Most of the people who come here for the first time will choose to go to the island of Wanxiang. We ferrymen have seen many people, so naturally we can see some clues." While explaining, he flattered Lu Yi without leaving a trace. Lu Yi had to admit that he was good at talking when doing business, and he was also very observant. "Brother, is it convenient for you to leave a musical imprint?" The young man continued. "Next time, if Taoist brother wants to go somewhere, feel free to call me. I'm usually working in the Myriad Sea, so even if I'm not free, I can call a nearby brother to receive you at the location you designate. Lu Yi naturally had no reason to refuse such a convenient offer. He immediately exchanged musical imprints with the young man. The young man introduced himself again, and Lu Yi learned that his name was Fang Wanli. If I want to go somewhere outside the Wanxiang Sea, will you ferryman escort me? Lu Yi asked. Fang Wanli smiled and said, as long as you are in the Wanxiang Galaxy, there is no place that we ferrymen can't reach. Also, as long as you are on the way, the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce will be responsible for your safety. There will be no accidents. The confidence in his words also showed the powerful background of the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. If it's convenient, tell me more about the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. Lu Yi took out a few more spirit jades and handed them over. Fang Wanli happily took them and thanked him. Then he began to talk tirelessly. After his explanation, Lu Yi finally understood the roots of the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. It could be said that the Chamber of Commerce was the largest and most powerful force in the entire Wanxiang Galaxy. Although it was named Wanxiang, it was not just an industry in the Wanxiang Galaxy. It was a colossus formed by the local forces of the Wanxiang Galaxy, with the participation of all the major top domains. The participation of these external forces was not deep. For example, the famous Yellow Dragon domain had a sunshine powerhouse in the Chamber of Commerce. He could not interfere with the normal operations of the Chamber of Commerce, but if there was a big problem, the Chamber of Commerce had the right to ask this sunshine powerhouse for help. Correspondingly, the Chamber of Commerce would send some spirit jades as offerings every year. It might not be a lot, but no one would refuse such a free gift. On the surface, the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce only had a few sunshine powerhouses overseeing the Wanxiang Sea and presiding over the various operations of the Chamber of Commerce. But in reality, they had the secret support of the major top domains, or rather, checks and balances between them. The internal situation was quite complicated and could not be explained in a few words. This was also the reason why the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce had been able to control the Myriad Elephant Sea for countless years and become the most powerful force here. They had tied all the top domains to themselves. This kind of binding might not be firm, but none of the top domains were willing to give up. It was undoubtedly a very clever method. Chapter 1382. There's one more thing that you need to know. Fang Wanli spoke excitedly. He was willing to tell Lu Yi more because of the few pieces of spiritual jades. What is it? Ordinary foreign cultivators who do not have a pass will have to pay a fee to enter the island of versatility. Of course, the fee is not much, only 5 pieces. Brother, you should be able to afford it. 5 pieces is not a small amount. Lu Yi said calmly, although he did not think it was a lot when he paid 10 pieces of spiritual jades for the ferry. That was because he had a good family background. If it were a normal cultivator, who had just entered the starry sky, 1 piece of spiritual jade would be enough. They would not be willing to use it to travel, and would most likely prefer to fly slowly to the island of versatility. The main reason is because there are too many cultivators coming to and from the island of versatility. If there were no restrictions, the island of versatility would be overcrowded. Charging 5 pieces of spiritual jades as a passage fee would greatly reduce the number of people entering the island of versatility. This was indeed the case. Everyone liked to go to crowded places, and the constellations were no exception. If there were no restrictions, then the cultivators who came here would most likely gather at the island of versatility. In the early stages of collecting entry fees, many people who did not need to go to the island of versatility would not go there. There are also some spiritual islands that are open to the public. They will also charge different amounts of spiritual jades. Brother, you need to find out more before you go. However, most of the spiritual islands are not open to the public. They are the private lands of different factions. Brother, you need to be careful. Do not enter rashly and be treated as an intruder. How do you differentiate them? Lu Yi asked humbly. Brother, you can go to the Chamber of Commerce and buy a star map. These spiritual islands are marked on the map, but the colors of the words are different. If it is red, it is a private land that is not open to the public. If it is white, it is open to the public. Only now did Lu Yi know that the colors of the words marked on the star map were very particular. When he checked the star map previously, he did find that the names of the spiritual islands were divided into white and red. However, he did not understand the mystery behind it. There were a lot of cultivators traveling back and forth. Lu Yi discovered another interesting thing. The flying altitude of your fairies is lower than the flying altitude of the cultivators? Feng Wanli hurriedly nodded his head. Taoist brother's observation is very detailed. It is indeed so. Although there are no rules on the surface, everyone has been willing to abide by them for so many years. The main reason is that the speed of the fairy is too fast. If it is mixed with the crowd, it is very easy to collide with them. Taoist brother has also seen that there are many cultivators traveling in the sky above the 10,000 elephant sea. The fairies won't collide with each other? What about the planetary boats of other cultivators? Both the star boat and the star boat have detection spell formations that allow them to sense each other's presence in advance. Lu Yi nodded. This was similar to how a star boat could sense the obstacles ahead of it with the help of teleportation portals. Upon closer inspection, Lu Yi noticed something else. Normally, the planetary boats driven by cultivators wouldn't fly directly over a spiritual island. Most of them would take a detour, probably to avoid any misunderstandings. However, the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce's ferry didn't seem to care about this at all. It didn't matter if it was a big island or a small one. They would just fly past it. The spiritual islands on the 10,000 elephant sea were of different sizes. Looking down from the sky, they were like chess pieces that adorned the surface of the sea. This reminded Lu Yi of the chess sea. That was the first time he had worked together with Wuxia. They had killed countless enemies. It was also that battle that made him realize that the medical cultivators of his clan were not simple. After half a day, a huge spiritual island came into view. Along the way, Lu Yi had seen many large spiritual islands. However, none of them could be compared to the one in front of him. In terms of size, this spiritual island was undoubtedly the overlord of the entire 10,000 elephant sea. This was undoubtedly the 10,000 elephant island. The buildings on the island were arranged in an orderly manner. At the center of the island stood a group of palaces. A huge pagoda-like building stood at the center of the island. With the pagoda as the source, the streets spread out in all directions in an orderly manner. Feng Wanli steered the ferries to the edge of the spiritual island. He stopped at a place that looked like a ferry, and said to Lu Yi with a smile, "Brother, once you've arrived, you'll be able to fly freely after paying the entrance fee to enter the 10,000 elephant island. However, you're not allowed to fight on the island. Please remember this." Lu Yi nodded his head slightly, and took a step forward, arriving at the ferry. There weren't too many experts guarding the port. There was only a white-haired old man, who was lying on an armchair with his eyes closed. He seemed to be in a leisurely mood. There was a table beside him. On the left side of the table, there were some mystical jades that were dazzling to the eyes. On the right side of the table, there were pitch-black badges. There were a few people in front of Lu Yi, who had just arrived, and were preparing to enter the 10,000 elephant island. They seemed to be a group. One of the middle-aged men glanced at the old man and said, "Mr. Bai, I'll take it myself?" Judging from his words, it was obvious that it was not his first time on the 10,000 elephant island, as he was very familiar with the place. Mr. Bai, who was lying on the wooden armchair, did not even lift his eyelids. He waved his hand slightly, as if he was too lazy to entertain the man. The middle-aged man took out 20 mystical jades and placed them on the table. He then took out 4 badges and distributed them to the people around him. He then brought his fists together toward Mr. Bai and led his companions into the 10,000 elephant island. They flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After seeing this, Lu Yi followed suit and took out 5 mystical jades, exchanging them for a badge. As he was about to enter the island, Mr. Bai suddenly opened his eyes slightly and glanced at him, before he calmly said, "The badge must be worn on your body. You are not allowed to store it in your storage ring or other storage space." It will be useless if you leave the island. You can leave the island from any direction, but you have to enter the island from the ferry. It was obvious that he knew it was Lu Ye's first time here. Thus he decided to explain the rules to him. Lu Ye had already learned about it when he was chatting with Feng Wanli. He brought his fists together as a sign of thanks for the advice and set foot on the 10,000 Elephant Island. He was not in a rush to leave, but turned around to observe the situation. Behind him, more people arrived one after another and took their badges. Mr. Bai still had his eyes closed, showing no interest in the matter. No one dared to take the 5 mystical jades as the entrance fee. Lu Ye's eyes were filled with envy. 5 mystical jades were not much in comparison. One could easily find 5 mystical jades in a suitable location in the star constellation. However, if it was 5 mystical jades for one person, what about 10 people, 100, or even 10,000? This tiny ferry is definitely a treasure trove filled with mystical jades. Judging from the frequency of cultivators entering and leaving the island, this ferry would bring more than 10,000 mystical jades to the 10,000 Elephant Island every day. And there must be more than one ferry like this. There might even be 10 or 20 of them. However, no matter how envious he was, this was still a way for others to make money. Lu Ye suddenly had an idea. If he could obtain a mystical island here, and then find a way to attract cultivators, turning his mystical island into a place where cultivators would come in and out, and then collect a certain amount of entrance fees, wouldn't he be able to make a fortune? This idea only lingered in his mind for a moment before disappearing. Not to mention how difficult it was to obtain a mystical island. Even if he could obtain one, he might not be able to keep it. Even if he could keep it, what could he use to attract cultivators? So many top domains had their own mystical islands here. They must have thought of this before. After a while, Lu Ye walked towards the island. After a while, he stood in the middle of an extremely spacious street, looking at the rows of shops on both sides, and suddenly had the illusion that he had returned to the 9 regions. In the Cloudy River battlefield, the Tianji cities were as lively as this. However, in terms of scale, the Tianji cities could not be compared to this place. The value of the goods sold in the shops in the Cloudy River battlefield could not be compared to the goods here. The forces behind these shops included the domains of many galaxies. It could be said that any cultivator could buy goods from the entire galaxy here. They were not afraid of running out of goods, but they were afraid of not having enough spiritual jades. Lu Ye had just arrived and wanted to broaden his horizons, so he casually entered a shop with the sign Wonderful Pill Shop. This was obviously a place that sold mystical pills. Due to the limited resources of the 9 regions, it was still difficult to refine mystical pills that were beneficial to the cultivation of constellations. However, this situation would gradually improve. When the 9 regions could nurture higher quality spiritual flowers and herbs, they would naturally have the qualifications to refine the corresponding mystical pills. Of course, the alchemists of the 9 regions first had to solve the problem of pill recipes. The interior of the Wonderful Pill Shop was extremely spacious, and the interior decoration was also very neat and tidy. When Lu Ye entered, a young and beautiful lady was in charge of receiving him. What surprised him was that this lady only had the cultivation of the deity C level. He thought that the cultivators who came here were all above the constellation level. After all, the environment of the Wanxiang Sea was not suitable for cultivators below the constellation level. There was no difference between this place and the galaxy. There was drifting energy of the galaxy everywhere. A cultivator of the deity C level was not strong enough to withstand such energy. However, there was a deity C level here. Lu Ye sensed for a moment and realized that there was no trace of the energy of the galaxy here. He understood that this island of versatility must be covered by an extremely intricate array. Under the isolation of this intricate array, the energy of the galaxy could not invade the island of versatility. Therefore, it was able to allow living beings below the constellation level to survive here. Thinking about it, this lady was only in charge of receiving customers and helping to sell the goods of the shop. If they really let the constellation level do this, it would be a waste of talent. If they used the true lake level, it would not be enough. The deity level was just right. One had to admit that the forces behind this shop were very considerate. They did not waste manpower and financial resources, nor did they make the customers feel belittled or have other unpleasant experiences. The lady's attitude was very warm, and she introduced various types of mystical pills to Lu Yi. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Lu Yi walked out of the wonderful pill shop. The lady saw him off attentively. Although Lu Yi did not buy any mystical pills, she had her own integrity and would not easily look down on any customer. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.